What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Between Two Heads. My name is Jameson, Welbourn. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Addison, DeMoura. And today we have a very, very special guest. We are joined by Mr. Wookerson, a.k.a. Lot Comedy. Wookerson, thank you so much for taking the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you guys for having me on. I want to take a minute to just kind of shout out some of the people that got me here. Of course, my wife and kid, I'm expecting a new baby. My mom, my godmother, rest in peace. Slinger Banjo kind of got me started in this game. G's Gallery, first person to ever hold a show for me. Ben, 21 Slabbage, Honest, the whole crew over there really hooked it up. Solomon Stewie, rest in peace. Fitzy, rest in peace. Kenny B, rest in peace. Harold Hunter, we miss you. Shakedown Street, thank you. I love you. You're still here. Scott Deppy, always shoot me straight about art. Norm, Kate, miss you. World Peace, Ocean, love you. GZ1, Tina, miss you. Chris Vidal, Chris Naratko, wouldn't be here without you. Kerry Getz, Mark Brenstetter. Chico Brennis, NJ Skate Shop, Trey Hill, Jest, Iraq, A-Life, Back Guide, I'll see you soon, I hope. Cokes, a.k.a. Jenks, a.k.a. Monkey, I love you. Josh, Bob, Ogre, not Ogre Farms, but shout out Pepe too. Professor Sift, Frosty, proud of everything you always do. Tricadelics, Teddy at Florical. Ted the Alien, Catchy Moondies, Base Neck Toe, Roger, thank you for believing in the vision. Zach P, The Truth, Anthony, Gong, Eli, Pat, Ian, Mish, and Maine. White Bread, Kinda, Hopper, Trevi. Everyone in Philly, especially Pyro, my brother. Lot Comedy wouldn't be here without any of y'all. All these cats are really part of my past, my history, like everything going forward. I got more names I'll drop throughout this episode, but I kind of wanted to start it off, throw a little love to some of the cats that got me where I'm at,
Absolutely, man. That was amazing.
Proper.
I think that's a really cool way to start the show. And I mean, it just kind of lays the groundwork as, you're somebody who's been around and been in the background of a lot of things for a really long time. And before we dive into all of that and everything that you've got going on, as we always like to do with the show, take us back and tell us a little bit of what your childhood was like. I know from our brief conversations, you grew up in the Newark, New Jersey area, and just take us back and tell us what that was like.
I was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, Raritan Bay Medical Center. New Jersey is a huge part of me. As many people know watching this, it's Jersey Mike. It's been Jersey Mike since Fish Lot a long time ago. I think, Harold Hunter and some of the guys at the Brooklyn Banks were some of the first people to kind of call me Jersey Mike. I was a punk. I almost got my ass beat every day. I didn't belong there. I wasn't good enough on the skateboard, but I had good weed and I liked the vibe. And I always came with an attitude that was unabashful, unafraid. And, I earned that nickname through growing up in that state. My mom died when I was 13, so I kind of got pushed to a little bit more of a harder life before other kids would have. I ended up finding Deadlot. Skating on Deadlot was like a thing for me when I was 11 and 12 and 13. My mom had cancer, and a family friend used to take me to Deadlots whenever they were in town. So I used to go to Giant Stadium, 92, 93, 94.
What's your first memory of Deadlot? Sorry to interrupt, though.
No, the first memory of Deadlot was like skateboarding, trying to practice kick flips, like 11 and 12 years old, and Jerry Kelly drunk with a beer screaming at you because you were skating too close to Bob Snodgrass's table. That was Deadlot to me. Like, that was my first introduction. I feel like I'm still living on Deadlot. Like, I feel like even my years on Fish Lot was still attached to that original parking lot scene, in New Jersey, East Rutherford, where I was just like allowed to skate. I was bad and I was allowed to skate. Those were two things that didn't coincide. You go to the skate park, but you had to be good. Like you ride around your town, you get chased by the cops. When you went to Deadlot, people cleared off the steps for the kids to go skate. It was like a community that really I was looking for. Losing my mom at a young age, I think I was really searching for a community, and I think I found one when I found the lot. And it was really about seeing the pipes and seeing about how everybody kind of looked at those pipes, looked at the weed, looked at skateboarding. And for me, all that shit was an outsider. You were an outcast in my neighborhoods growing up in Puerto Rican, Dominican neighborhoods, man. Like Perth Amboy, they nicknamed that town Puerto Amboy. It was like I was one of only 4 white families in the apartment complexes. And my mom was a first and last month, she would move to different apartments to get the first month and last month free on a lease. And that's what you called them. You called them first and lasties. Like, we were the families that traveled around the apartment complex to get those extra couple months for free. Single mom working for the city. Like, I was a rough kid, So finding Deadlot and finding a place that was you can be that here. You're not weird. You're not, out of the normal square box you're supposed to be in, and riding paths. So that kind of led me to seeking out more of those scenes. And when I was 13 and 14 living with my godmother, It was about hopping the PATH train, going to New York, trying to go to the Brooklyn Banks, trying to like go down to Philly, ride the SEPTA, go to Love Park. You know, you see that you're wearing the hash shirt that I make, like that's Love Park for me. You know, growing up going to see the homies skate in Philly, and you know, like I said, shout out Kerry Getz and Mark Brandstetter over at Nocturnal. Like those were cats we used to go wait in line for sneakers and smoke weed that we got from the other places, and I'd bring from Deadlot, and like have my little Snodgrass pipe at 15 years old, like smoking at, you know, little parties. I mean, that was my childhood, you know, was what New Jersey was everything. New Jersey was smack dab in the middle of New York and Philly, and you got all of it, you know.
What was school? What was school like for you at that time? Like you're deep in skate culture, your mother's passed away. Like, I mean, I can't imagine that school was really taking precedence. Was there anything in school that was kind of a saving grace, or a subject that you enjoyed, or a teacher, or anything like that?
Art and selling weed to rich kids. So like I grew up not so wealthy. I grew up in Perth Amboy in Newark, and then my family took a lot of money that they saved, and my mother worked for the state, as I mentioned, so she had a pension plan that she had set up where I got some money. And they did maybe the best and worst thing for me they could have done was they sent me to a rich kid school, man. It was an all boys high school. It was wild. I was a nut. I didn't fit in. The kids were coming to school at 16 years old with new Range Rovers and Land Rovers. I was like skating to school with like ripped up pants and getting yelled at for my hair being too long. St. Joe's and Metuchen, man. Shout out Jay Williams. He's an ESPN Sports Center commentator. Like I graduated with that kid. Like, we got him high for the first times. It probably wasn't the best thing for him. He ended up going and having problems with drugs and shit, but he's clean now and he's got his life together. So, you know, those are weird years. It was growing up, a bunch of us without money, growing up in this school with all kinds of money. And for me, I was like, oh, I know how to take their money. The Deadlot taught me that. These kids will be the Dave Matthews Band frat boys in 5 years, you know? And so like, that was where my brain was at. I think school was like a wash for me. I barely graduated. My girlfriend at the time, Caroline, and her family kind of took me in. My godmother was old, so when she took me, I was 13 on paper, but I was probably 21 in my head, you know? I was already like skating in New York and hanging out, getting into trouble, jumping the PATH train. Like you couldn't really stop me. She told me my curfew was 9 p.m. I was home at 8:30 so I could sneak out by 8:45, you know? Like that was just, you know, childhood was kind of a wash once mom died. You know, she wanted things for me and I wasn't like focused enough to kind of realize that. I graduated high school and I enrolled in City College. I got accepted to School of the Arts, but I didn't go. I just wanted to go on fish tour. I was a mess, you know? So at that time it was really like psychedelics. It was weed. It was art. It was, you know, New York City, and school was kind of an afterthought, you know?
Wookerson, just taking it back, just before you go on, before graduation, what was your first memory of art for you? Like, was it in the kitchen with your mom with crayons? Was it in an art class? Like, what was the medium of choice that you kind of realized that this was something that I'm very deeply interested in?
I don't know. It's weird. I've always drawn. Ever since I can remember, I've always been drawing. It was never like my thing though. Like I was never asked or sought out for the art. I had an art teacher, Mr. 40. He was a cool dude. That guy in high school is the first person to ever unlock me into realizing like there's a job and a career around all this, you know? And I pull a lot from what he said many years ago with all the stuff I do now. It's really about passion. If you have passion, you could probably make that into a job. And I was never told that by my family. My mom loved my art, but the rest of the family would always be like, you know, you can't make any money doing this. Like Irish immigrant family, I'm the child of an affair. My mom dated a married guy. His family never knew me until my mom died, and he tried to get custody of me. Art was, none of these people had art in their life. Like nobody could draw a straight line, you know? So I was that weird kid who showed up in the family who was like, didn't care. My Irish family's all carpenters. You know, that career came into play when I was growing weed and making hash. Carpentry was like a huge part of my life as a child, but they pushed me every time I drew something. They would push me into like carpentry, you know, like it would be like, you're drawing, let's do blueprints for like building something. And it's like, no, I want to do colors and paint. And it was like, you know, some of them were very homophobic. They were like, he's a fairy if he's going to paint like this and do shit like this, you know? And my mom was supportive of all of it, you know, every little bit of it. And I think had I had my mom alive, I probably would have pursued art a little bit more like passionately, because she was pushing me like, who cares if you get a job? Like, whatever. You go to school, have fun, and when you're out, you figure it out, and you go get a shitty job then. You know, like my mom was cool like that, you know? Her thing was you could always start over, you know? So I keep a lot of what she had with me. My first memories were probably drawing things that she liked, you know? Like tracing or drawing and recreating little things, like little images that she liked. She used to collect the little Precious Moments dolls. Remember those things? Like the little babies with the big eyes and shit. You know, like I take a little bit of that into my art with some of the bigger eyes that I draw, as like some stuff I used to draw for her back in the day. You know, it was all simple stuff, man. And it wasn't ever encouraged, you know? My mother loved it, but it was never like encouraged. You know, it would always be like, well, what else did you do in school? You know, like, oh, that's
what's
cool.
the first piece? What's the first piece of art that you sold? Sorry to interrupt.
The first piece of art that I sold is Wookerson. Was to a collector by the name of Young Slabby. Shout him out. There's a lot of history between me and him, but that kid actually believed in me. Believed that my shit was going to pop in a way because of like my backstory. You know, like his whole thing is he knew me when I was managing Shiloh Massive as his like business manager, but doing a lot of like random day-to-day stuff with Brandon and Third Gen, working for them for a few years. And I had started working for the Emerald Cup, like kind of transitioned into the Emerald Cup. And that's when I had like met a lot of those guys in like the San Francisco Bay Area scene at the time. And it was a kind of meeting with G from G's Gallery out east, Saugus, north of Boston. G was the one. G was the first one to really be like, this isn't just some art that I want to buy. I think he bought like the second or third piece that I had made. And he was like, you know, you have something. I want to like help you. I want to put you on to do a show and see like how it goes, you know?
I want to pause. I want to pause and just take it back. Like I definitely want to touch on that.
But those two guys are the ones, you know?
100%.
It was a Grateful Dead inspired piece and then a Biggie inspired piece, you know? So kind of like both my worlds was like Dead and then hip hop, you know? Anyway, sorry, James.
That's super sick. No. It's totally fine, man. My job is to keep it on the tracks. That's what it is.
I'll throw random questions in there, so you just have to excuse
Keep it up.
It's all good. It works, man. I wanted to ask you before we get into, you know, after high school and moving on, during that skate scene and running and traveling around, the skate scene is really intertwined with the tagging scene, graffiti scene. Is that something that you were a part of as well growing up, or were you around it, or did it influence you?
I was heavily influenced by it, and I was heavily around it, surrounded by all these guys. You know, I threw a couple names out there in the shout outs, but the cats that really like were in my life as writers really came when I moved out west. And I realized that a lot of the guys that I was hanging out with out east had been writers the whole time I'd known them. And I was just one of the dudes that brought weed to the party. I drew in black books. I'm in a bunch of kids' black books. I'm not really on walls. I was never one to go out and paint on the walls. I was lookout for a lot of those cats. But it was a part of your life if you lived in those cities, and like one of the homies would tag your deck and you would draw something on somebody else's deck. And when I came out to San Francisco and I was trimming weed on a hill, and I met Orphan, homie Aaron, rest in peace. Orphan was a legendary writer out here, and I knew about him on the East Coast. But knowing him, I got to know him, and he's like, you know so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. Like, you know all the writers out east. Like, you know all these kids in these crews. Like, you don't write, though? And so I guess for me, it was always like I wasn't drawn to the wall as much to put my name out there. I think I was still in this insecure bubble of like, nobody wants to see my shit anywhere, you know? Like the family had really got into my head, like, art is evil, art is bad, you will go to jail. And like, I don't know, it's weird. You'd think that I'd have been more rebellious and painted on more walls, but you know, I definitely had all the markers. I had all the spray cans, you know, I have them in my studio. I use them all the time, but I never try to claim that I was some big writer or anything. You know, that was never really my direct scene, but I have a lot of friends that's their life still to this day. For sure.
That's very cool. So talk to me a little bit about where your mind, like, where's your mindset at coming out of high school? You know, you enlisted in art school or got accepted to art school, but never showed up. Like, why was that? What happened there?
I don't know, man. It was like I kind of was doing the art school thing to get back at my family. And when it kind of was like going well enough that I was like going to succeed at getting accepted into a school that made some of the people in the family happy. And I think that turned me off. I was just in that weird, like anti everything zone, you know? And so I was like, fuck it. I like didn't tell them I got accepted, you know, to the one school. My aunt found out because another letter came about it, about enrollments and admissions and shit. And she, you know, she got really upset, and I was like already enrolling into community college, like Middlesex County College, bro. I was already like enrolled, and the purpose of that was because I felt like I could skip classes and still go to concerts in the area. Like, and still like my father, like I said, my father was, I was in a fair. My father had to pay child support. And the second that I would stop going to school, he wouldn't have to pay anymore. So part of the reason I went to county college was to keep that motherfucker paying. Like, that was a legit thing. Like, he called me on my graduation day, and literally I cut him off, and I was like, motherfucker, are you asking me if I'm going to college just to see if you have to keep paying? Oh, fuck yeah, I'm definitely enrolling in county college. Like, I wasn't going to, but I enrolled in county college to like force him to keep paying child support. And then I like dropped out, but I let it drop out in a way where he had to pay that whole year, you know? And so I think I was just so turned off from the world that I was just locked in my head I was going to end up on tour, you know? Like, I was like, I'm not skipping a Fish show. I'm doing this. This is my life now. Jerry's dead, but it's a different time, and there's kids out there traveling. I'm doing this, you know? And like, that was my kind of mindset out of high school, you know? Was like, I wasn't going to go to college. And then I realized, oh shit, I can fuck my dad over by going to college. And like, that was like a play, you know? Kids, man, what are you going to do, you know?
Oh man,
I think about that with my kid now. I'm like, I better not fuck up. Like, this kid's, I know what I was like when my dad fucked up with me. Like, I better not fuck up, you know? I see Addison smiling.
yeah, I know. I'm
Bro,
wondering
you've
if
got,
something in or not.
you've got my whole head fucking running 1,000 miles an hour. You know, my son though, like not a lot of people know my son because he's, you know, secluded away from everything. People kind of see him, but he's so sweet. He's actually very, very sweet and very
Don't let him watch this episode.
Well, no, I don't even know if he does or not. My daughter, on the other hand, she's like me in a little girl's body, so
That's
she's
wild.
completely crazy. My son, and it's even like, you know, it invokes some feelings because as a dad who's dealing with divorce and
Yep.
all these things, it's like you can see sometimes how your kids will have a perception of things, and then they're acting on that perception of things.
Yeah.
And then later on,
oh, totally.
you're like, what the fuck, dude?
Oh, I'm like,
So,
come on,
no.
are you really doing that? I'm like, I don't resent that I did that, but like, yeah, man, yeah, fucking A, like, for sure.
But a lot of questions, like, it brings a lot of questions to now, and I don't want to jump around too much, but to what your relationship is with your dad now.
Oh, I don't have one. I have a friend who's a private investigator that I keep tabs on him just so I know where he's at in the world. But he literally only tried to get custody of me because of that aforementioned pension money that they used to send me to high school. He was coming for that. No joke. And I knew that. And so you got me at 13 years old standing in front of a judge. My mom's dead. All right. I'm with my godmom at the court. This dude's on that side with like his family. And the judge, and I wasn't, no one talked to me. It was a whole court case, but I was there. And the judge pulled a stunt. I want everybody to stop. Michael, please come to the stand. And the judge straight asked me some questions. At 13 years old, I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was like, that fool ain't been around for years, and all he wants is the money that's coming in a month and a half when they file the paperwork, and he gets custody of me. He gets control of that money. My mom didn't want that. He knows it. My mom wanted me to be with my godmom. He knows it. If he wants to be in my life, I'm free every weekend, every other weekend, whatever you decide. That's what I want to do. And so the judge just looked at me, looked at the family, looked at my family, and was like, do you guys hear what this kid's saying? I don't even know why you're in court right now. And just rocked the gavel. That's how it went out. He saw me for about a year and a half, and then he fell off, you know, and it turned out he really did want me. And I was too much for him to deal with, you know. I had 2 half brothers that I got to meet and got to know, which was awesome. They're no longer with us. One died in a car accident. One died of self-inflicted wounds years later. I kept in touch with like where he was at so I could talk to the brothers, you know, because I felt like I understood a lot about who he was, and they owed him more than I did, and like I was there to help them at times. But we lost touch. I lost touch with him. He lives in Vegas. He lives outside of Vegas somewhere. Real scumbag shit, you know.
Was he into drugs? What was his?
No,
his
he
story?
was into sports betting and just being a womanizer. I mean, just like
Wow.
kind of classic Italian shit. I hate to just like stereotype it, but you know, I used to always say I'm half Irish, half Italian. The Irish is the good part, you know, and that was like put in me by like my Irish family, because you know the hair is not, you know, I don't have like red hair. Like, you know, I came out Black Irish. Like that was pretty much a term that was used either if you were, you know, born of like a different color skin or different color hair, and it meant that you were outside of like the genetic circle. So everybody in my family was like fair haired, and I was the one that looked like my father, and they hated me for it, you know. But so then when my dad tried to get custody of me, it was like, oh, I see what this is, and that turned me off to some things, you know, like. So like now with I have a daughter and I'm expecting a second, you know, it definitely is in my head, you know, like all of it, you know, I'm rewriting and breaking chains every day I live, you know, so,
100%.
you know, it's like divorce and all these things, like you really have a choice still. Like that's the wild thing I learned. Like, even though he made his mistakes and all those fuck ups, like he still had mad choices to make with me, you know, and he fucked up on those too. But that's like, I feel like you fuck up on a relationship, that's one thing. Like, that's not even like necessarily all your fault, you know. But the kid, that's like, yeah, your kid's supposed to be a jerk. You're supposed to deal with it, you know.
You should have a connection to your kid no matter what. That's
on some level.
If you don't, you should work on it. You know.
Yeah, and what's wild is I'm his firstborn, and now he has 2 dead kids, and I'm the only one left, and he has no connection. So he probably sits there miserable, you know, like thinking about weird, fucked up shit like that, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, he deserves it. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, it you know, life is what it is, and you know, the point is to never get like too caught up with it. I take it all and use it on how I want to be with my kids, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is what we make of it.
No, for sure, and
your effort, you know.
And I feel like when you have shit like this happen, you gotta at least share it, because then there could be like Addison, like you with your kid, like it's not fully connected, but like there's things that you'll take away and be like, oh, okay, this is a grown person of, you know, he was a son of this situation. Like, okay, you know.
One thing that, you know, and I completely agree with you, Wookerson, but one thing I want to take back, I want to change gears a little bit and ask you that we always cover at the start of our show that we haven't touched on is, what was your relationship with cannabis like in the early days? Like, when was your first experience with the plant, and what was that like?
My first experience with the plant was I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my mom had people over rolling joints. Like, that was my earliest memory, was seeing her and her friends gathering around a table, like rolling up joints. And the memory didn't like exist until I was like 15. Okay. Like, it was an image that was in my head as a kid. My mom would have all these friends over. And I remember one time she had all these friends over, and I would wake up because I'd hear everybody laughing out in the living room, and I'd come out there. And I remember it. Like, you know, it was one of my memories of a young kid. She was like, I don't think we can have these parties anymore. And I remember, like, as I got older, being like, oh, she was having all the homies. Like, she was the dealer. My mom was the trapper to all of her friends. So she had the weed that she was serving up all these cats to make her little side money to get me my Christmas presents. So when they would all come over to hang out and grab their flower, that was like her little sesh. And I was sleeping. But because I was young and she had probably been the plug for years, you know, she was single mom having this kid, like the community helped raise me. So all the people that were in that living room were like my aunts and uncles, not blood aunts and uncles, but, you know, the people that I called aunt and uncle that were her friends, right? We all have like those friends that are uncles to our kids, you know? And so those were my memories, was like learning that my mom was into cannabis. And I used to go to this one BMX dirt park that was in like Woodbridge, New Jersey. Like, it was not that big, but it was a little shitty one that these kids had built in this little park. And I went there one time and I came back and I was like, Mom, we found these kids and they were doing pot at the bike park. And she laughed, and I'll never forget this. And then she broke me down at 7 or 8 years old and like had a real conversation about, well, that's okay. You're not old enough to do that. I don't want you doing that with those kids, but they're not, what they're doing isn't wrong. You know, like, she gave me like this really interesting kind of descriptive thing that I'll keep with me to like ever have to confront my kids about, you know, drugs at a young age. she really hit me off with like some real tidbits of knowledge. And now those are my first experiences with cannabis, was like through my mom. So I think still to this day, the plan is a way for me to connect to my mom. You know, I'll never be like, I'll be completely real about that. Like, I know when I was 13 and 14, I was getting high, and I was getting high off of weed that I had like found when they were cleaning out the apartment after she passed, and I stashed it, and then I got high on it later. And that was like my first kind of ins, was like getting high on like my mom's old stash, you know?
Wow.
Those were the first times that I ever got high, that I ever smoked it, you know?
That's cool.
When did it become a regular thing? When did it become something somewhat habitual for you?
3 years later, you know, 15, 16, it was every day. And I was the plug at high school, you know? Anybody who watches this or anybody who watches this or any of the documentaries, but any of my friends from that era, like the 90s, was when we all got into sour diesel and all got into like things like that. I was on Deadlot, you know. I knew the AJ crew like through people. Like, I was getting served, although it was expensive, $500 an ounce. I didn't care. I could sell it for $600 to the kids in high school. And I was getting sour diesel from New York. I was getting Poudet from Uptown. I was coming down with Haze and fucking sour in high school in 1996, you know? Like, I was a regular thing. Like, it was a job at that point. I wanted to wear Jordans, you know? Like, I didn't have the money to buy the shit that, you know, like, all the kids that went to school came with Land Rovers to school. Like, I didn't have that. I had to get their money to go buy my Jordans.
100%.
You know, so those are my big first kind of weed experiences. And it was like introduced to weed and then introduced to commerce like 2 years later, you know?
100%. So what was your move after leaving community college?
Fish tour ended, and I ended up staying with a friend in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and my dog got hit by a car at this party, and I was in like a weird depression state, and then I just decided to live in central Pennsylvania for a couple years. Weird. But my good friend Teddy works at fucking FloraCal in NorCal up here, and he's been my friend since we were like 18 and 19, you know, and like I met him back then. I was supposed to be there. I don't know why. State College, Altoona, Pennsylvania is a weird place, but I was meant to be there. Like I did time there, like 2 years of growing weed, and weird. It felt like jail. It felt like fucking weird jail, because it's just Pennsylvania to a Jersey, New York kid was just so different. But the rent was cheap, man. It was like $80 a month for like the bedroom I slept in, and we had a house that we grew weed in, and then we moved to another spot that we grew weed in. The house was like $500 a month rent. The electric was cheap, you know, 6,000 watts worth of flour, and we were loving life, you know, like we were killing it. We would drive that weed to New York City. I would grab B-Cers from New York, drive it out to central Pennsylvania, take the Amtrak train with like 100 pounds of fucking B-Cers. Like, that was me. Like, high school, I was learning how to do everything. Fish lot was raising me. Kids on that lot were like teaching me the game. They were teaching me the game, obviously, because I was going home and making them hella money, like a young fucking high school kid taking all their weed for too much money and somehow making more money on top. And then I was in central Pennsylvania and like learned how to grow weed out there, you know? And so when I came back to Jersey a couple years later, I kind of got reintroduced to like the AJ circle through like this homie Vinny back then. Shout out Chenzo. Those cats we were working a lot of like AAAs, we called them back then. Everybody remembers this shit, you know? And it was like the kids who were trying to get into having better weed, but didn't really know it. And we were taking advantage of them by selling them AAAs for too much money. You know, that was kind of like my 3 years after high school. That was like my college, you know? That was like I was going to college for shit, you know? Like, truly, you know, I was learning how to make hash. I was learning how to fucking grow. Then I was like moved back into New Brunswick, New Jersey, Rutgers University. And that was like college towns. Like I'd gotten used to state college, so I wanted to move back to like another college town, you know? Yeah, man. High school was kind of a wash. It's weird. You ask me to like memories about high school, and most of them are about selling weed. It's fucked up.
That's what it's about.
It was about selling weed, and the weed that I got, and the shows that I went to, like going to island tours, skipping school to run to like Nassau Coliseum to go to fish shows. Like, that was high school, you know? I was practically not even there. I think I had 67 fish shows under my belt when I graduated high school.
Wow.
And your rent was a high-end gram of solventless hash.
Bro, like, you know, $80 a month. Like, we had that house, we went on tour and like just paid like a couple $100 before we went on tour and came back, you know. Those were the days, man. I swear.
So how long?
I wonder if the rent is still the same.
Oh, Pennsylvania? Probably not out there, but it's definitely like Juniata and Altoona, like those little weird ass towns. Like, yeah, it's probably still dirt cheap. That was why we loved it, because we were like only 45 minutes from State College and hella bread. You know, those kids are paying way too much for everything, you know, because you're in the middle of central Pennsylvania. Like,
it is such a weird place.
It's a weird place, you know, so it was me and a couple fish kids, you know, it was me and a couple kids from tour. So we had like a little community, and it was not the worst, but it was definitely a weird place to be, you know, just getting small.
Do you think there are any kids in that area right now with heady glass that are smoking rosin that are in that area right now that are like, oh fuck, what's going on? Like, look at this.
Yeah,
crazy.
There has to be. Because Pennsylvania's changed a little bit over the years, and with New York and New Jersey being what they've been, I think the State College was always one of those weird places where like there would be a cat there that like he knew or she knew, you know, and you like roll up on them and be like into their apartment, be like, whoa, where'd you get all this shit from? You know,
silk
like
sheets on their bed and shit.
Yeah, just shit, and you're like, so you know about the shits, you know, like, and a lot of these cats are getting shit mailed to them, I'm sure, you know. So there's probably like, I'm not going to drop brand names or anything to snitch on anyone, but like there's probably some heady jars like rolling into like State College via mail, you know?
Oh yeah, with the internet for sure.
I mean, Silk Road changed everything, you know? Like I'm wearing my Arrowwood shirt. Like there's parts of like that we lived through that change, you know? Like I know kids that they tell me the first ounce of DMT they ever got was off the Silk Road, was like, you know, shout out Ross Ulbrecht, you know, like that whole shit changed our game for sure. You know, we're still living in a world that's like from that, you know?
For sure. Absolutely. So I mean, where was your art during this time of Fish Tour? Like, was it present, or was it kind of taking a back seat?
I was tagging. I kind of got into tagging around then. I was drawing like on venues. I was at venues. I would write little sayings at the venues. You know, 6 up, like random little kind of jokes from the lot. 6 up was our call if the cops were coming up behind you. You know, no deals. I would write that on the walls next to like the beer gardens at venues. Nobody probably remembers that shit because I didn't tell anyone. I was just writing weird little notes and putting stickers up. But I think that kind of like pushed me towards, you know, years later is when I started this page was from Fish Lot. You know, it was like while I was on tour, and we had been watching, like, you know, everybody was religiously on Instagram looking at Fat Jewish and all the different memes that were starting to blow up. I think we had made like a couple random memes. You know, we got to talk about Wook 17, my old roommate. That's got to happen. Shout out Dan. Dan was a really cool dude. We were on tour together. We lived together in New Brunswick when I moved back there. I lived with him. And if you don't know who Wook 17 is, Google it right now so you can get a picture, both of you, if you don't know, and everybody who's listening and watching at home. But I lived with that kid. All right, he's a nice guy. I lived with him. He's a nice vegan, organic dude. The memes that came out about him and the persona that he had during that time that I lived with him was wild. Like, I've never lived through anything quite like that. And a large part of the reason why I carry the moniker Wookerson is because of living with Dan during that whole era and knowing that like Wook was a term that we used to diss you. You know, you were fucking wooked out last night. You did too much. You motherfucking Wook. You didn't pay for your shit and your money's all over the floor. Like, oh, you fucking Wook. Your drugs are everywhere. You got to clean this room up. Like, it was really like a diss, you know. It was not a term of endearment, you know. And the kids today that use it as a term of endearment, it's very much like other words that have been repurposed that were hateful, hurtful words. And if you would have called me a Wook when I had shitty dreadlocks, and if me and Jameson were at a parking lot and some random dude came up and was like, those dudes just called you a Wook, we would have gone and beat those dudes' asses. You know, like we would have busted a skateboard out. And
it became a term of endearment. It like became this like weird, and you know what it was? It was shit balls. Sorry about that.
Your fucking phone got woke the fuck out there, you know?
My shit just got hyper wookery on me right now.
Exactly. But I think the
what
glass
the wook
culture
is going on? Hold on.
glass culture really like Adam G, Banjo. There's a few homies, there's like the Wook site, the Wook spotting book. There's a couple things that like Scott Deppy can tell you. There was an era where like it was changing and he was really in like the fucking vortex of it all, being on like, he was on his tours, like he was really more on String Cheese lot, but we would see each other at lots and I knew him through like other glass blowers. And I didn't really know Slinger at the time, but Slinger was like the dude you knew on Fish Lot. He sold marbles after the shows, and he'd put the marble on his hand and put a flashlight underneath and sell them to all the spun kids walking out of the show. And like Marble Slinger was born in my mind, like that he was like a legend. So years pass, you start seeing all those guys hanging together. The Wook shit started with Dan like really blowing up in his image and all these fucking pictures of him on the Ween forum and everywhere.
Didn't he murder somebody? Like, what's the story about that dude?
So Dan was at Bonnaroo, the first Bonnaroo. We were all there. And some dude, I can't remember his name, it's on YouTube. The documentary's on YouTube. It's called A Head's Tale. Okay? A Head's Tale. It's a documentary about the era when Fish retired during their hiatus. Not retired. They retired in 2004. They were on a hiatus and Bonnaroo happened. There was a bunch of big music festivals. So this kid goes to a bunch of festivals in Canada, in the States, and he interviews people. And he's just asking them random questions like, what's the difference between the Grateful Dead and the Fish scene or whatever? And that was the question he asked Dan. Dan had just woken up out of his tent. Note to self, before you've had a chance to look at a mirror, refuse all interviews, just refuse all interviews. Like tell everybody, this is not the vibe. You don't want this, I almost knocked that off. That was a good one.
That was crazy.
You get into this fucking space where you're like, all right. He was asked to be interviewed, and the guy didn't ask his release form. He didn't ask anybody's release form. So he had to put out this website that was like, what did it say? I can't remember what the name of the website was, but it was like, have you seen these people? I need to find them. Like he was trying to get his documentary made. He was looking for releases, and Dan was like the 17th person on that list. Wook 17. And Dan, it was a freeze-framed image of his interview. And Dan's teeth are not the best, don't hate me, Dan, for saying that. But like his teeth were a little messed up back then and he hadn't brushed and like he was a little, wooked out.
He was owning it for sure.
And they freeze framed like in the middle of him talking. And that was the picture that went out to the internet. And back then, memes were just starting, man. Like they were really just kind of being born within our scene, at least. Like in the Fish and Deadlot, like that was the first, man. Like he was the first person really memed. Like I think Fantasy Tour happens, and like now there's all these pictures of him, and there's Ween Forum and all these pictures of him, and
wasn't there like for some reason I remember that they interviewed him and he was talking about some dude that had a hatchet and was like attacking someone else. Isn't
that might be like a fake, deep fake type thing? The
Okay.
one interview that he was asked, the only question he was asked in that interview was like, what's the difference between the Fish and the Dead scene? And he gives like a pretty educated answer. And he's like, it's really about the people. It's not really that scene or that scene. It's really about the people that show up. And it was a really educated answer. And he gets into it. And he was probably just like feeling sweet on the guy asking him the right questions,
Yeah.
But then all of these weird like videos and stuff start coming out. Like his name is Daniel Patchcombe. He attempted robbery, attempted murder, like all these random stories. Meanwhile, he had no fucking clue. He was literally at a show at SOB's in Manhattan, and not a Fish show, not a dead related show, not a jam band. It was a hip hop show. Like me and my buddy Ogre brought him to a hip hop show, and we were at the McDonald's right outside. And these kids were looking at him through the window, pointing. And they came inside and they were like, "You're Wook 17." We were like, holy shit. At that time, we hadn't really like approached him about what was happening. But that we had to. We had to be like, yo, you have an issue, And like, I used to try to tell him to own it. I wanted to give him my page. When I first started my page, it was on Fish Tour. And I tried to be like, no one knows who I am. They only just know this Wook Wookerson page. I want you to have it. What do you mean? Let's make merch. We'll sell this. I'll fucking help you. He didn't want it. He didn't want nothing to do with it. Like he felt
where's he at
ruined
now?
his life. I don't want to give you all the details, but he works in a hospital. He has a legit job. If you roll up on him, I think he's like a technician. You wouldn't be needing emergency services if you saw him, but maybe if you like ended up needing to have like something x-rayed or something, you might see him in your x-ray, and it might fuck you up to know that Wook 17 is all cleaned up in the hospital now, you know?
You come out of the MRI machine and he's the first thing you see. Like, what the fuck?
That's what I think about all the time. I'm like, yo, the kid that like ends up there and knows who you are is going to be fucking hilarious.
Dude, he looks like a napkin that rolled through deadlock for 7 years. Like he had a film on him that was pure resin. Like when I saw that when I first saw it, and then when you mentioned it, I just Googled it and I'm like, oh fuck. I know exactly who that dude is.
Yep. So I lived with him for 2 years. During the second year in New Brunswick, New Jersey is when all this shit started happening, you know? And it was wild for him because, you know, we were all hustling back then. We were all doing our thing on lot. And that was one of those things where it was like, Dan, you can't work anymore. And back then that was kind of like a fuck, you know? What are you going to do? Sell grilled cheese? It doesn't make that much money, you know? But yeah, he was like, he cut his hair the next tour, 3 shows in. Wook 17 got a haircut. Shit was posted on the Ween forum. I think then that's when he knew. He was like, I'll never get away from this.
He should have owned it, bro. He could be like the most famous one out of all of us right now. He'd fucking be like,
hey man,
you know,
I to each their own. Everybody deserves their own choices with life and whatnot. But I was literally willing to give, essentially at the time, like did not know what this would become for me, but I was willing and still am totally willing to give and help to make that happen for him. Like that was something where I was like, all right, this is genius. Like I started this fucking weird joke page. It could serve as like his thing. Like he could fucking take this on and like right the ship, so to speak, you know, like at the time.
Attention's a powerful drug. It's one of those things where you kind of, really it's a light, right? And when that light shines on certain things don't shadow so well. They don't feel so good. And
you don't get to
see
choose
some crazy shit.
And you don't get to choose, man. Like I wanted to be, and who knows, man, like whatever. I wanted to be a hash maker at a time in my life where I thought that was the only thing that was going to make me happy, you know? And this room that we're in right now was a hash lab, you know? In San Francisco, I had a hash lab in my house. It was the whole downstairs of my house converted to fucking, I had an ice machine pumping out 600 pounds of ice a day. Like I was doing it, you know? And you ask Nick T, you ask all these guys, Brandon, like, you know, Professor Sift, all these cats, like, I mean, I looked up to all of them. They were like my big brothers, but I indeed was little brother, you know, like I was like following in footsteps of a lot of these guys, you know. I remember like seeing Rocker T in New York at the wetlands. I remember seeing a lot of these cats that paved a certain way for us back then, you know, differently than the kind of paving that us were doing now for the kids after us. But yeah, man, like it was a time that's all I thought I could do was that. And somehow the art came out of that page, you know. It was like people kept pushing me. My friend Shakedown Street, who passed away last year, like, you know, it's like that kind of thing where they pushed you to realize, oh, you actually have like 10, 15,000 people following you. Like they might, you know, 200 of them might buy a shirt, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I feel like we could have helped Wook 17 back then, but he really intentionally did not want it. He didn't want to like have a career in that path. And like I said, man, you don't always get to choose where that light is shown, you know?
No, I mean, we all don't know how to tap dance. That's the fucking thing.
So it's real. And like, I don't know how sometimes I'm like, I don't know how the fuck I ended up here, like doing this and talking to y'all. But like Slinger was one of the ones that was like, this is really where you're supposed to be, man. Like you're from the lot. Like you really have that voice. There's all these people in the scene now that are trying to have that voice, to like pretend and fake it, like, and go to a few shows and then try to do it. Like you actually were there long ago. Like you're still here. You've been doing all this shit since. And I think that was the thing with Dan was like, for me, like knowing him and then taking away from like, all right, well, Wook 17 was my roommate, you know, like when kids come up to me and they're like, oh, what are your Wook credentials? I'm like, I don't even need to tell you.
You're like, bro,
I don't even need to tell you. You don't even know. I was there when they created Wooks, you know, essentially,
you
know, like I was there at the dawn, the Oculus in the movie with the apes banging on it. Like I was there, you know, like I was up in the hills watching them do that, you know? So I think that it's definitely important knowing that like Dan's story like spawned a whole culture based off of what people thought was, what I took away from it was his photo is what everyone's after. You had a great night the night before. You don't care what you look like. Your friends don't care what you look like. It doesn't
it's almost,
matter. You know,
yeah,
like
it's like
what a Wook is, you know?
when you see a Wook, the first question that comes to mind is he dead? That should be the first question that comes to mind, because they don't look, you know, they crawl out of somewhere like a trash bag. They fucking fall out of a tree. They slide out of a burrito stand. Like, you never know where the fuck you're going to find them. And then even like, you're talking festival now.
Yeah.
And that's like the dawn, you know, no, bunch of people didn't go to sleep. Bunch of people went to sleep prematurely early because of X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
And there's a, you know, there's a whole fucking, you know, I wonder if, you know, kids get to go to festivals nowadays, but you know, the early like Great Went and fucking insane shit that was like our Woodstock kind of, you know, like what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah, I remember
like,
the first Bonnaroo, what is that, 2001? They had it set up like a little town, you know, because it was the dudes who ran, it was Superfly, it was the dudes who ran Dave Matthews and all the other big fish events that ran that, that like laid that festival out. And that was that first Bonnaroo, and it was so hot, but it was so laid out like a city. I remember standing on the corner of 6th and Broadway. They had like listed out streets. And I was on 6th and Broadway holding up a big fat, like big nugget. And like the shit that you would never put in a bag today, you know, which is, that's a whole other conversation. But it was the show bud, you know, it was like the show bud that sold all of my 2.8 sacks, you know, my Hates.
Hathan, baby.
You know, Hate Street, shout out.
Hates.
The 2.8 bag, you know.
2.8 is very generous. I think
10,
like 2.4 is with the gang bag.
Bags, you know. So we were like pulling those on the lot and making a lot of money that year. But there was a lot of kids who were just partying, and that was Dan. Dan was just partying, you know. And like you got wooked the fuck out, and then the next morning when the sun hit you, you were definitely not in the best shape. And
Crispy
nowadays,
is what they called it.
You got cameras everywhere. You didn't even have cameras back then. That kid walking around that parking lot, it was like a big fucking camera, you know?
I think kids now are trying to fake the wookery, like almost like jujitsu dudes that like fake the fucking gear. They're like trying to be wooks, and you look at them and you're like, you're not a wook. Like you brushed your teeth 9 days ago. Like you're not a fucking wook, man. Like you're not there.
It's kind of like, you know, they used to say the dreadlocks grow inside before they come outside, you know? It's like the shit gets rooted inside you first. I'm constantly scrubbing off like my old wook ways, like on a daily basis, trying to be like a responsible father and like doing all the shit that I do, but it's still in me. Like I still have nights where I don't sleep. I go all night smoking hash, making art. 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm passing out. My wife is like, "You better be up in 4 hours for this kid. You got to take her."
Well, that's who wooks are now. Like
that's a wook now. That's me as a wook now.
But if you look at children, they're little wooks. Like they wake up with a sandwich stuck to their face.
They're puddled on acid. Yeah, my kid is basically puddled on acid. And my homie Ben, Icy Collective, you know, Ben told me when my kid was born, he's like, they're spun on acid until they're about 11 or 12, and then they hate you.
If you're lucky, yeah.
He's like, just get ready. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's fucking crazy. Other than Slinger, before we kind of move off the lot and talk about what happened next, other than Slinger and of course, you know, the wizard himself, Deppy, were there any other like prominent members of the lot that you were connecting with in early days that have had a major impact on the culture today?
Man, you know, shout out Jerry Kelly. He doesn't really remember me as a kid back then. But, you know, when I did my first show at Bees, I made sure that Jerry did pieces with me because that was like a big thing for me. Seeing where Millie has gone, seeing where like some of the guys that were choosing to kind of draw and make images in glass back then and where that's kind of come, you know, and like you see now it gives a space for artists like me, for artists like Jeezy. I mean, dude, Jeezy killed it with all the pearls. Him and Rocco, like there's just a certain level of art that's able to be translated with glass that's just not the same with other art forms. You know, I was talking to homies about it who are a lot of graffiti artists. Like there isn't as much collaboration between artists, like direct artists, not brands, but artists, as much as there is with graffiti and glass. And there's something about like being able to translate your art form to like the masses that both of those things really possess. And, you know, Jerry Kelly, like I said, man, he yelled at me for skateboarding too close to Bob Snodgrass's table, you know, 1994 or some shit. And like, you know, he doesn't really remember a lot of these stories, but to me and like the kids that I was growing up with, they were the legends. Like they somehow were the cool guys on lot. And this was a lot full of 70, 80,000 people, you know? How was it this one table had a certain energy that no other table had, you know? And so to see that like Jerry Kelly was one of the guys that at that age was kind of one of the young bucks hanging around that table, you know, doing his part by yelling at me, the little buck, from getting too close to the table with his fucking flipping skate deck, you know, like barely ever landed a kickflip. So my board was always flying left or right, you know? And what was that, little Ashok? Little cold gold. But you get into this kind of place where, you know, those guys in that era, Jerry Kelly's probably one of like the ones for me because, you know, of course there was the Snodgrass, of course there was the Batcham, of course there was that group of homies, but Jerry was East Coast, you know, like Jerry was Massachusetts. He was tapped into G and the old Chem Dog crew. You know, it was like there was a certain thing there for us kids like that really like he's one of the guys that I look at now who he pushes me and will hit me with DMs randomly when I post stuff. That like really makes me feel differently, you know, like when someone like that who was an elder to you at a young time on the lot, and now you're kind of removed from the lot in as much of a direct way as you were, and he's still there. Like he's still there in my life, you know?
That's very cool. So I know you were pretty integral in creating the Bob Snodgrass Award with the Emerald Cup. At what point did you get involved with the Emerald Cup? Was that what came next and what kind of took you off tour? Or you did on the side, or how did that happen?
Let's see, man. I was starting to not do as much tour probably like 7-8 years ago, and I decided to get a little bit more refocused on my cannabis life, if you will. You know, I started going to like every single High Times Cup again, going to like every single side event, hitting all the little sessions, doing as many glass shows as I could. I think I started working for Emerald Cup. It was after I was working with Third Gen and Dying Breed, and I was moving away from that work, and I was getting more.
Let's back up then. Let's back up and touch on that before we touch on Emerald. So how did you get involved with Brandon and Third Gen and Shiloh, and where'd that connection come from?
I think I basically showed Shiloh a jar of rosin at one of the Emerald Cups. Man, this is, you know, before Prop 64, still in the 215 days. And I think Brandon and them like swept. That was the year they had won like 7 out of the 10 or some shit. And they all knew everyone was coming for them the next year, you know? And there was a lot of new techniques with pressing. I think Steve Powers had just started making the Powers plates. Low Temp had just started changing their game. Other companies are starting to do anodized plates. We were using the Jack presses, new presses. I think Pure Pressure was going to come out a year later. They had one device at that time, and they were just starting with a new one. Rosin was like a thing, right? Rosin Tech, all these guys were starting to like produce equipment. And a lot of us had been trying out all this equipment. You know, the t-shirt presses, repurposed t-shirt presses from the beginning. And so I show Shiloh this jar of rosin. It was cold cured and it was white. I think it was like a Gorilla Glue cookies and cream blend that I had washed. And Shiloh looked at it and he was like, "What? I need your number." And we exchanged numbers, and then we'd seen each other a couple times at events after that. And I get introduced to Brandon. And Brandon is Brandon, of course. But Brandon straight sizes me up and we get along. Like we hit it off. You know, it was like we talked about hash. We talked about what we didn't like about the industry, what we did like. And me and Brandon hit it off. And I was more working with Shiloh and helping like manage his shit. But then I started helping out with the press lab and showing Santi, who's now, I don't even know where Santi is. He's still at Full Flavor. Santi's a killer, man. Santi was like a young, skinny little fuck you'd never think could do anything. And Brandon would just yell at him at 6 a.m. to wake up and get after him. And I was one of the ones that would be like, maybe Santi should just be let to sleep a little bit later. He's actually a fucking workhorse, man. Like he's actually a monster. And so I was really good. Like Brandon Brandon taught me a lot. Brandon and I, like, I feel like, shout out Brandon in a certain way. I mean, shout out everybody from that crew. I know there's a lot of beef between all the parties. I've somehow managed to, like, make friendly with all of them as time's gone on. And I never had a bad, falling out with anyone. And I love Brandon to death for what he's done with Ego Clash, something that I helped him start the first one, throw it like with the house that we rented in outside of the Emerald Cup. Like, me working with Brandon those years definitely changed my shit. Like it put me back into the hash game like I was when Fish and Dead was a thing, like the only thing, and Bubble Hash was the only thing we had. And I had stopped washing for years, and Brandon really like got me back in heavy. Like he caught me up to speed on everything with the freeze dryers and everything that they were doing. And then I came in and brought him new press equipment. And I think like that new press equipment and some of the stuff that I had been learning through Nicotine and some of these other cats, we started sharing knowledge. And there was a really cool phone call with Wyo, with Sam, and fucking Nicotine and Brandon and Santi when like everybody's learning how to make the solventless diamonds and kind of sharing knowledge. That was an epic era in my life. I'd never really been around that many heavy egos that were like sharing knowledge, like with each other, pushing each other to become bigger. And then I started going to Spanibus with Shiloh, and that like really opened me up to more of my own shit working with Emerald Cup. And that was when like Emerald Cup kind of approached, I think it was like Taylor and Tim approached Shiloh like, hey, we need somebody to take over the glass and the awards that we're doing. And we have kind of like, it was a weird kind of, the homie was having health issues that used to do it. I never got to meet him. I was never friendly with him. I just didn't know him. And I didn't know a ton about the Emerald Cup Glass Awards before I came in. So I did a lot of research, and I went and asked all my old homies in the glass game. And I think I went to Intrinsic, Buck's show in Portland. And Jeezy1 invited me. And Jeezy's like, hey, man, talk to these guys. Tell them what you're thinking, and they'll tell you if it's whack. And shout out Jeezy for being that one to tell me some of my ideas were straight whack and that they wouldn't work in the glass scene. And kind of how to approach it. And through that, like, that's how I got the Emerald Cup job, was like them seeing that I knew all these guys, that it might be an easy job for me to kind of call, several glass blowers to figure out who would be fit to do this job and have it not be whack and have it not piss anyone off. And I hope I did my best. I'm sure I pissed somebody off along the way, but that's how I got that Snodgrass Award. And that was my main goal. My main objective was like, I'm going to get in with these guys. I'm going to do them a great year. I'm going to bring them all this hype. The first year is going to be insane. Bro, I lost money. A lot of you kids out there listening, man, fucking A. Spend money if you know it's your rep and your career that's going to come out on the end. Like, don't cheap yourself out because the people you're working for won't pay for it. I bought 2 booth spaces. Ran me $7,000. Like, I'm sorry, but I do not shout out Hazel. I do not like Hazel. You've been trying to text me, and that's why I'm not answering your fucking phone calls, Hazel. You should be fired from Emerald Cup. Sorry, it's the only diss I'll put out there on this fucking interview. She was a prick about all the things that I wanted to do with where the glass booths would be, all of that shit. She was the only one that really fought against me. And in that whole process of like doing that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to pay Hazel her $7,000. She wouldn't give me 2 free booths for my glass blowers. All right. Let that be known. She wouldn't give me free booths for my glass blowers. She charged me out of my pocket, which I think that year I only made $6,500 for working for Emerald Cup. So I was already $500 in the hole before the shit even started. I set up a booth. I trapped my own hash there. It was Prop 215, so whatever. I trapped like a couple pounds of hash. I made my money. I had all the glass guys set up in a real cool booth inside. They were like 2 booths away from Dying Breed, so they had a cool space. I made an impression, bro. Like, everybody was like, this is the coolest fucking thing we've ever been involved with Emerald Cup. Like, you really did it. You put us in the room with the music. Luke Wilson was stoked. Everybody was happy. I got everybody paid. I didn't take anything. It was all transparent. I wasn't like, here's your money. You don't know what I got paid. It was like, here's your check from the Emerald Cup. I'm not involved. That was like a big thing for me, was being transparent.
Yeah.
And so when I did that, like, it was like JD got his checks. Everybody got their checks. It was what it was. It was good. And the next year was when I was like, y'all like what I did? Let me do this for Bob Snodgrass. Like, you let me, I did all that for you. You got all this cred, all this clout. Now you owe me. And I don't want money. but I want you to let me do this award.
Yeah.
And for them, they were like, okay, we'll let you do this award. And the big thing for me was like, I did that award because I knew the next year they were probably going to move away from me working with them. And it was getting towards where they were like wanting Puffco to do the awards. And I liked that idea. So I was into it, but I knew that would like kind of eliminate me from I didn't need to be there anymore, you know? And I'm not stupid. I knew it was coming. So I set it up where I could get the Snodgrass Award done. And then the next year I got both Darby and Banjo, who were the first and second people, because I told you I did my research. I always do my research. Banjo was the first one to ever make awards for Tim Blake. Darby was the second. So I went and convinced those guys. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to work with it. But they were like, Mike, we'll hear you out. I'm like, Banjo, Matt, here's the deal. In that meeting, this is what's really funny about that meeting. In that meeting, we go there with a homie to grab a pipe. And I'm there to kind of hang out, and I want to pitch him the Emerald Cup shit. And he's like, I didn't really have a lot of fun doing it the first time. Why should I do it this time? I'm like, listen, bro, it's probably going to be the last time like glassblowers are going to have like the whole show. You were the first one. I kind of want you to be there at the end. I want you to take the flower awards. I want Darby to do the hash awards. I think I had Lord do some awards too. So I had like all these homies from my life, like be involved in the last one, The one after that is when Puffco got involved, and I was still involved. I still ran it that year, but this year that I'm talking about was really the year. And it's the year that at Banjo's house, he's like, you're doing all this for the culture. The fucking kid from Fish and Deadlot, who's never even made a mushroom marble, is going to get Bob Snodgrass a Lifetime Achievement Award. What are you doing for yourself? And it was a weird question. Like, I didn't have an answer. It was like, I just know that if I do this, like, I'm the only one who'll do this because I'm the only one thinking about doing this. Like, no one's talking about this. Nobody in glass, like, no one's ever done this. Why? And so Banjo was like, I respect that. I'll do the awards for you, And in that process, Banjo was like, Slinger tells me that you like to draw in black books. Maybe you should let people see what's in those black books. And he kind of like sparked a fire. That's what really started the Wookerson stuff. Like, Lot Comedy was a meme page. I'd already been making memes from Fish Lot. I was making memes all the time. I think I started it in 2014 or 2015, maybe even sooner than that. But it was all memes. Most of the followers originally on that page, like it's all memes. It's all jokes, psychedelic humor, drug-related jokes, Fish Lot-related jokes, Wook-related jokes. But then I started trending into like cannabis jokes and like all this other shit. And that meeting with Banjo, like getting him to do that last kind of glass, centric Emerald Cup Award show, then it was like, then it got into Puffco in the following year and then this past year. But man, that was it, man. I went from Dying Breed Seeds with Shiloh, and Shiloh married Taylor. And then that kind of transitioned into, it was weird to like work for Dying Breed and Emerald Cup. So I just went with Emerald Cup and stuck with the artists. And then somehow in the midst of being back with all of my glassblower art friends, all of this comes out, like that was kind of like, you can ask me the questions next, but I'll tell you, it leads right into that. It was pretty much directly from there. You get into that last Emerald Cup, and that's when we all got COVID. That last Emerald Cup, like most of us got sick from that shit in December, January, and then the world closes down in March. But I was basically coached like a year and a half before that by Banjo to kind of like think about what I'd want for myself, like all this shit I'm doing for the culture. Like, what did I want for myself? Like, not in a selfish way. He never put it like that. He just was kind of like, what's going to be there when the rubble and all the dust settles? Like, what will you have built for yourself to kind of still work on,
Absolutely.
Like, what will you have to keep working on,
Well, people don't realize that, that you have to, that's a great question that he asks, because a lot of people, like I was looking at I got asked the question the other day, where do I want to go? And I was like, what a fucking question. And it was like this workbook thing that I was doing for this like other weird shit. And I'm like, where do I want to go? Like, what the fuck? But it feeds into that. It's sort of the same thing. Like, ask yourself questions that are crazy like that, because, for him to ask you that, I think he did you a huge service to help you out, because
massive.
Matt you're looking at it
for life. Me and Matt don't see eye to eye on everything. Like, we don't agree on every little thing about this world, but like, he saw something in me that day that was like different than, what he was seeing in other people. And he's like, all right, I'm going to do this for you, but you got to do this for me. Like, you have to think about what I just said to you. That's what I want.
Maybe he was recognizing that talent in you and helping you and essentially saying like, hey, I recognize that talent in you, but what you're going to do if you don't recognize it yourself is give yourself away to the point where there's nothing left. So here's a great question for you to figure out how to lay a foundation under what you're doing so that there is a tripod there. There is something that's going to be poking up out of the fucking ground that can take you to that next place later on.
Yeah.
Because it's great advice, you know?
It doesn't have to be selfish either. It doesn't have to be selfish and self-serving. It really can be rooted in the way I felt it and the way I took it from him was you're building these things, you're building these platforms and people are going to use them, you know, and there's beneficial things that are going to happen from this. Once all that's done, you know, are you going to be happy with just doing that? Do you feel like you're going to want to be a little bit more involved, you know? And that was some real shit for me, you know, like that was like, oh yeah, like I actually, I want a piece of this, you know, like I don't know. I didn't really know. I never thought about it like that before. I was always kind of like mentally a number two in my head, you know, I'd always worked underneath someone. I'd always worked for a brand, you know, when I was like collecting shoes and working for skate shops back in the day, it was always, I was like the runner. I was the one underneath, you know, like I never owned my own shop, you know, I was never that guy. It wasn't until I started making hash, but then when I made hash, I directly went underneath Shiloh and Brandon. And I loved it.
Well, it's a testament to being the hardest worker in the room. Like that's, if you want to fucking be successful, if you want to make it, if you want to zap people's toes and be that way, just be the hardest fucking worker in the room. Clean the toilet, clean the counter, whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
it'll turn out good for you if you're nonstop trying to think about what else you can do.
Yeah, because you got to get out of your head to be that way. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. You can't be the hardest worker in the room who's all up in their fucking head. You know, you got to get out of your own way in order to do that. And there's just a magic in getting the fuck out of your own way and being the hardest working person there because it draws it. And I think what he saw in you was the fact that you had this talent and he wanted to see it continue. So, hey kid, here's a little fucking gift. Here's a little something to like, because, you know, it's a bright light that you want to continue to see shine. And that was him being like, hey, make sure you got something underneath yourself. And that's, people think nowadays, the two things that I see people doing the most of that's fucked up is negative talk, but then not enough positive talk, not enough like, come on, man. Like, you know, you're driving the ship. You're dealing with all this every day. You know, you're feeding yourself and you're wiping your ass. Like, let's go. You know, give yourself some credit.
I think a big thing for Banjo too is like, hey, you're all about the Snodgrass guy, but like, why? You know, that was like the original skateboarder, but now they're doing kickflips over here, like, you know. And I was like, yeah, man, we can't properly show light on Marcel and Corvallis and all those guys if we don't like start with him. And me and Banjo got into like not an argument, but like an interesting little debate. He's like, what does this kid know? Like, let me press his buttons. And I was like, listen, man, Bob is Bob, but Bob wasn't always like the nicest guy. I remember from like he wasn't inviting everybody to the farm. He wasn't inviting everybody to learn the techniques. And some of those guys had to go figure out shit on their own. And Jay Lee and some of these cats who like formed their own little world away from like the Eugene area and went in Corvallis. And like, I feel like we have to start somewhere, you know? And for me, there was never any event, all these weed events, all these big cannabis and hash events. No one had ever like stopped and been like, oh, there was this guy, Bob Snodgrass, and there was this thing, the Grateful Dead. And like, because of that, we probably are here today, vending fucking shit on tables in an asphalt space. Okay, can we all like just accept that this is all still deadlocked? Like, that was what it was for me. Was like, we need to at least put that flag in the ground. We were on the moon. Now we can go back and figure out how we're going to fucking do this other space travel. But like, we got to do this flag first, you know, like we have to like kind of mark that Snodgrass was what he was. And we love him for that. And then he perfectly gave the second award to Slinger that second year. And that shit made me cry. Like, I got teary-eyed because for me, that was like, all right, this is some full circle shit. This is a dude from one era now kind of praising a dude from another era. And if it wasn't for Slinger and Degenerate Art, like, would half of our friends be as wealthy as they are? Like Hash and Glass, like all of it. He really put certain part of that culture and he attached a lot to it. A lot of those interviews that he did on that movie when Banjo's like, hey, you know, Aaron, how long until we don't have to worry about our faces on camera? Those were being filmed in a concert parking lot, you know, like, so, I think like there is a part of like the history that's attached to it, and I really feel like it was special to do that. And I think Banjo saw that in me, and he was like, "Oh, this motherfucker is like he's on that wave. Okay, where do you fit into that wave, bro? You're basically building it yourself. Like, where do you fit into it?" And that was where his thing was. Art is your thing. Like you may not realize it now, but you're a creative. You're creating all these spaces. You're navigating the spaces of corporate world, and you're a street kid. And that was a big thing for me, was like keeping a good relationship with all the people I worked with, even though there was some that I didn't get along with. I tried to make sure that like the big bosses were like, you might hire another street kid, like you might hire somebody like me after me, and that's important to me, because what am I doing if I get through that line, if I don't, kick the door open for the kids behind me? Like, I still look at everything like I'm going into a concert. Like, you don't have tickets, but I'll kick the side door open. You'll get in with me, and there's something about that. Like with this industry, I feel like we have to do that now. I mean, you're with Pyramid Pipeline and other things that you're trying to do. Like it's an industry that's like trying to fuck us. So we have to like get in with a program that like helps us, be stable, stabilize each other's thing. So it's weird when you get into like me walking away from one job, going to the next. I really tried to make sure that I kept those relationships. Like those bridges weren't burned. Like, yeah, maybe I had some disagreements with some people and like thought they should have got fired, but I wasn't trying to burn the event down ever. I was like really trying to protect the events, like those were like, that was church for us. Think about like the 18-year-old kid or 21-year-old kid, or even a kid who has a fake ID who gets into a High Times event. Like back in the day, like that was church to him, that was maybe the first time he'd ever got to meet Cuban Grower. It was the first time he ever got to see any of these guys like in the flesh, And there is a certain part of our industry that has developed into that. Like some of these cats are celebrities, like we go up to events and people want to stop and say what's up to us. And that's weird for some of us, but it, to me, like that was Banjo at a time, like pushing, maybe me, a voice of a little bit more of like the every kid, like he's a little grown up. He's like the grown up street kid, like, I think that's something that I'll always keep with me, like some of those guys telling me that they believed in me. Scott Deppie came to San Francisco to film, was it the 2 Chainz episode? I think that's what he came here for. And shout out James Furlow, Groovy Money, Cosmic Supper Club back then. But James was like, hey man, Scott's in town. Do you want to have a sesh? And I was in the middle of finishing this painting that Quave eventually bought. But Scott came to the house and we were sessioning, and the whole time he was like really, really into like hearing what the fuck I was doing with the painting. He's like really, really into it. And the whole time we were like, bro, we're trying to, relax you. You have a thing tomorrow. You're going to film like Most Expensivest with Chains tomorrow. Like you brought the hookah down and everything, So like he busts the hookah out in the living room, and I'm like, I'm so nervous. I'm like, put that thing away. That's got to be on air tomorrow. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, nah, bro, this is the point. Like, this is this culture right here. This happening. I was drawn to your house. Like, this is a happening. And like, he kept putting it into my head. He's like, your art is the reason why we're here. And I'm like, nah, bro, we're here because you're in town and you're filming with 2 Chainz. Shut the fuck up, Scott. And he's like, no, man, like your art like brought us. It's like, it was a couple homies had come in because they knew Scott was in town. And like, we had a couple homies, not a lot of us, but a few of us in the living room. And, shout out Hashley, James, there's a few of us in there. And it was just like this cool little moment where Scott basically reaffirmed everything that I had been kind of pretending in myself since that Banjo meeting. And I had I think it was Slabby Fest, right? Slabby Fest, and I was putting the art up for, this one was after that. Oh, was that one for that? Yeah, it was for that show. Because that show was like 7 miles from the Windsor lab where original Orange Sunshine was made. And I was doing this big Orange Sunshine piece. And, Scott was just like into the whole thing. And that really like twisted me out, like thinking like, all right, Scott has this whole big thing tomorrow. But for him, he's finding like the energy in telling me some good advice, like that stuck with me. Like, I try to keep that with me when I ever see like young kids doing doodles and they're looking for like my approval or something. And like, even if I think it's like biting off my work too much, I still try to give them like a good push. Cause I think of Scott giving a glass blower a push and like seeing a light in some of these kids and being like, he's going to figure it out. show interest in what he's doing now, but he's going to figure his way out. That was
Yeah.
like, that really, you know,
I hope more people realize that too. I hope more people realize that, like, when you're coming up in this game, things that are more important than what you're wearing and what glass you have is really like the way you treat those people that come up to you that show you. It might not be the greatest hash. It might not be all those things, you know, but the more polite that you can be to that person, they remember that stuff, and they will come back later on and be like, oh, and you know, and I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of it myself. I'm sure I fucking crushed someone's dreams with some stupid shit, but at the same time, I've witnessed it many times, and I've seen what you're talking about when it comes to Scott, where he just, you know, and he's genuinely interested in rad shit. You know, he definitely loves that stuff, and he's unaffected by who he is in every way possible. You know, that's the last thing. I think I made fun of him when he bought a Range Rover, but I think it's a very comfortable car. I think that's what he said.
I think for Scott, Scott is like a mentor for so many of us, not even like artists or creatives, but just even business people I know that have gotten to know him because of, you know, he's a very genuine dude. You know, they call him the alien for a reason, but it's all about like being a visionary and like kind of trusting that. And like, he's one of the people that'll tell you like everybody's a visionary if they just like open that eye to it, you know? And it's kind of like, he's really been good with me. He'll always shoot me straight on art. If I send him a picture, you know, he'll always shoot me straight. He'll always be like, this is, you know, you're doing good. Or like, you know, he'll never say it's bad though. It's weird. It's like, I find a way with some cats where they're talking to me now where I feel like I'm trying to embody some of that shit. You know, it's like trying to give them corrective criticism without being like negative. It's a fucking magical skill. I haven't figured
the rest of the world's negative enough, you know. You gotta try
to
soften it up a bit.
No, and it is, man. It's like those guys are really what helped me kind of push where I am at now. You know, like seeing where they're at and being like, wow, okay, I'll never get bored of this. I'll never like lose track of like where I can take this, because I nonstop have these other fools that are way further down their roads than like I'll get to, and they're still finding like the new shit. They're still finding like the push for like a new thing, like a new hype, you know, what for themselves, not even like, not hype in like the clout, you know, industry societal sense. Like they're just into like whatever hypes them up, you know, knowing that like around the corner, there's going to be some other shit that hypes them up. And I don't know, it's something wild. Like to think, you know, some people call me relentless and they ask like, where do you find it? Where do you pull it from? Where do you find it? I don't know, man. It's just like, I'm nonstop, you know. I am a restless person. I got to have like 15 projects going at the same time. Even when I was working for one company, I was probably working for like 3 at the same time, selling sneakers and fashion on the side or some shit. And, you know, it's got me to where I'm at. You like never stop. Not the whole societal don't sleep, you know, work as hard as you can and die. Not that vibe, but just don't stop trying to get inspired. Like hash helps a lot, don't get me wrong, but always try to like be into new music, the new shit. Even if it's like you don't like it, just be like, I want to hear it. I want to go to a concert. I want to go to a dinner. I want to go to like some weed event. I want to go to some new sesh. And it's just funny because there's a lot of cats that you can see, they get trapped into like the one role. They don't go to the other ones. And then theirs starts to fall off, you know? And I won't drop names, but there's some events that aren't what they used to be. And
they're looking for acceptance.
Yeah, and they're looking, and what I find is that it's taking it back to Wook 17 when talking about the dead or fish. It really doesn't fucking matter. It's about the people. So if you get that through your head, your event doesn't fucking matter. My art doesn't fucking matter. It's what I'm painting about that matters. Like the culture that I'm representing is what will live on. You know, like all of that, the sentiment, you know, LSD World Peace, like that homie Joe is doing amazing stuff by just making people realize like they too are an artist and they could do this if they wanted to commit their life to it. And he has, and his story is wild. Fool comes out here trying to be a pro skateboarder, gets to the EMB and is like, these fools are way too good for me. Somehow convinces the art institute, like I think it was art institute, the school of the arts, take him in out here. He gets into art school and is like, I'm not good enough for this either, but commits to like being a part of the culture. you know, and commits to being a part of like this Bay Area skateboard, psychedelic cannabis culture. And my guy is one of the biggest members of this culture, and he doesn't like grow weed. He doesn't make hash. Like, you know, like he's got 710 collabs. Like Skelly loves him, you know, like all these, Joe is like one of the best people out in this city for artists, like for other artists to connect to, because that fool just keeps being like, yeah, I just go back in the room and keep doodling. He just had his first kid, and he's like trying to figure all this stuff out like I was with my first kid, and we relate on that level. But it's all about there's more around the corner. There's more fun, and it's not about you. And once you realize that, it like never ends.
Yeah.
You know? That's like
it's about sinking your teeth into the only constant is change. Like everything's going to keep changing. So as long as you're willing to just, hey, okay, you know, like, and that's what it is. I mean, shout out to all those artists that have that mentality, because you're not trying to impress anybody. You're really just trying to get it out of your fucking head. And it's like making yourself laugh. Like, you know how stupid shit makes you laugh? Mm-hmm. And it's the ability to share what made you laugh. That's art. That's like those little tiny fucking things that, you know, and then
it's why
you get it out there to everyone else.
You know? A lot of people would ask me why I didn't change the IG handle. You know, when I went from memes that were really lot comedy to like the art, and I'm like, bro, I'm still the same dude. It's still me. Like, I'm still finding my way to wear my nice sneakers on dirty parking lots and fucking make jokes. You know? Like, that's literally what it is, you know? And I feel like in this industry and all the kind of scenes and communities that I'm a part of, that's the constant, you know? Like hash, the culture, and like the plants. It's really like the constant, you know? And that was a thing for me with skateboarding at the Brooklyn Banks. Like, I was allowed to be there, not because I was good. I didn't have tray flips down stacks. Like, that was not my steez. But I had fucking AJ Sauer and I had Pude, and they were like, how the fuck did this kid get in with that crew and the Spanish Harlem crew? Like, who is he? And it was just, bro, I understood the constant in all those scenes was cannabis, was those plants. And if you kind of like worked for those plants and you listened to those plants, like you might find yourself in the right circles, you know? And like coming from me in apartment complexes, like I stayed away from pharmaceuticals. I stayed away from powders. I was deathly afraid of becoming a crackhead, because growing up in those apartment complexes, it was like you touch those things once and that was it for your whole life. I'm like one of the weirdo dudes in like psychedelic communities that like never put powder up my nose. Like, I don't have that on my record. Me and Action Bronson related to that one time at an event. It's like, you know, are we some of the only cats out here doing this? Like, no, there's other kids. But the thing is it all these drugs were lumped in the same fucking catalog, like why I'm wearing this shirt. All these things are put in the same fucking schedule. So kids growing up thought they were all horrible. So they do one and think the rest are cool too. And it's like, you know, the plants, man, stick to the plants, bro. Everything is derived from those plants. Go back to those plants. You'll get the roots. They'll tell you the answers. You can decide what you want to try after that, you know? 100%. And like that for me was like the constant, you know, and like where it is now today, it's like seeing all these guys around psychedelics and around hash and how everybody's just, you know, it's so central to like all of these scenes. It's almost like the curtain was lifted and it was always that and nobody wanted to talk about it, but now it's out and you can't take it away, you know?
Yeah. I think that we're going to see, you know, more and more events, and with guys like Addison doing, you know, Legends of Hash, and we're seeing other sessions, and I see more and more of that stuff. So I think that that's on the rise. But before we go forward, I want to go back and ask you about that first ego clash. Like, how did that come about? Like, was that an organic?
Do you want to take a dab first? Because we're an hour and 20 minutes in.
I'm good. I just got a little one. I'll hit this one. I'll do a dab after this one.
Okay.
Yeah, if you ever
just want to make sure you were getting oiled up, correct?
Yeah,
the ego clash. I want to make sure I give everybody like their little bit of credit on this, because it really was organic. Like, Brandon deserves, I want like 94% of it or whatever you want to call it. Like, Brandon was like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I don't want to enter more cups, but I have like these 99, you know, wins and all this shit. And it was kind of a joke. I can't remember if it was me or if it was Santi that was like, you should have like your own cup, you know, like fuck entering anymore. You should just have your own cup. And then it kind of became this like, oh, I want to have a party where like everybody shows up and it's like no ego. And if your shit's not as good as the other homies, you take your shit off the table and you put yourself down, you know? And that was like Brandon's kind of vision was, could we get all of us together to throw all of our hash on a table, no cost, invite only. Like, it was very, very janky. We fucked up and didn't have enough food. We had enough water, but mainly because we had fucking faucets in a house, you know? But like, we had this like big rental space that, shout out CMAS. I think Dougie, Hitman Dougie, was actually staying there too. The one homie Sam out in Illinois. I don't even know if he's on fucking IG anymore. But Sam, Chicago Sam, him and that crew had rented this house because I had told them, hey, we were all going to stay together, but I got this party I'm trying to throw. Like, if we get a massive house, like, let's do it. I'll throw down the money. Bro, I spent so much money on Ego Clash. I don't care if I'm ever paid back. I don't care about that. It was a whole different thing. Like I said, it was another one of those moments where my career was on the line. My reputation was on the end. I was down to pay. The owner of the house came in. The fucking Ego Clash was hilarious. That was mostly Brandon's idea. The rest of us kind of put together the house to have it at. Once he knew that we had the house and the space to be, that was like, I had the house. That's where all the glass blowers were coming to deliver all their trophies. That was the first year I worked for Emerald Cup. It was wild. I spent money on that rental house, and I did, what was it? One of the cars got stuck in the mud and destroyed the whole driveway. Cost me like a handful of thousands of dollars to pay the landlord. Burner shows up with fucking G-Pen Chris at the time, because they were doing like the cookies G-Pen shit. And Jigga, Burner, and fucking Chris show up. And Burner's got like 2 joints on his ear and 1 in his hand. Now, the only stipulation was like only hash inside the house. But am I going to tell old Gilbert to put that shit out? No, not doing it. Not telling Mr. Burner to put his shit out. So I roll up on Burner and I'm like, hey man, the landlord's in here. And like, he's not too stoked on joints. And he's like, okay, I'll keep it down. And like, literally 2 seconds later, he didn't have a joint lit at the time. He had like just put the one out. The landlord comes back in the house and is standing next to me. Bro, there was the landlord of this house was like the owner of the house. It's not like landlord. It was an Airbnb, but like the owner hears about it from the neighbors that there's like massive amounts of people at his property. So he randomly shows up and everybody's freaking out. And I'm out there like, bro, it's all good. I'll deal with it. And so I literally talked to the owner. I'm like, man, just tell me a number. Like, walk around, take a look. Don't tell anybody who you are. Just tell me a number. You know, and he looks at me and he's like, okay. So he comes back to me and he's like, $5,000. And I don't know why I had it in my pocket, but at the time I was still trapping. I pull out a wallet and I'm like, bam, here's your $5,000. He's like, in his head, he's like, I should have told this kid 10. You know, like I probably would have given it to him because it was like mid-party, you know, like TH Caesar's over there giving his description of somebody's hash. I'm like, this is not the time to close this party down. Like, the show must go on. Literally, the fucking guy is standing there collecting his money, and he turns to walk out the house, and Burner is there. Literally, him and Jai are like lighting a new joint up at the same time, and I just like hand in my face, just like, oh god, okay, this is happening. Like, of course, like Burner's gonna get us like thrown out of this fucking house. Like, how funny is that's going to be the story of the first Ego Clash? You know, the guy who doesn't smoke hash showed up, smoked a couple of joints, and got us kicked out. You know, but the night went great. The Black Dog hash was fucking fire. That was Ashley and fucking homie, like the Ice Extract crew, and they brought in that hash from fucking Michigan. That was in an era when like Michigan was really still just known for GMO. The Black Dog was some fire shit. I remember that. But I remember putting my hash on the table and seeing everybody else's and be like, oh yeah, I'm not winning, taking mine off. And then watching 5 other homies do the same thing. Never seen that at another event. Never seen that ever again. Like a bunch of homies being like, yeah, my shit's not as good as those 4, taking mine out. And like announcing it. Like looking at everybody at the table, be like, mine's not good enough tonight, guys, taking mine off the table. Like depressed, you know? But like no ego. And so that first Ego Clash was something where I remember looking at Brandon and I was like, bro, you created something that like, this is your thing now. Like, I'm like so honored and proud to like have been a part. I still have the old banner in the other room, like the original banners. You know, B, if you want, I have 2 of them. If you want, I'll give you one back. That's all good. But that first year was just by the seat of our pants, man. It was a party, you know? Like, it was such a big party that Burner and Jai were like, we got to show up to this thing. You know, like,
That's
that
really
was
cool.
that was a thing for us. Like we were like, oh shit, obviously Brandon knew Burner, like they were friends. Burner had texted him like, what's the address? So it wasn't like a, wow, these guys showed up, surprised us. But like, that was kind of like a cosign, for me. I was like, all right, something shit that I'm involved with is like, it's it, like we're doing good. You know what I mean? Like, and that was my first year with the Emerald Cup. What happened later with Brandon and Tim and the kind of division, like I wasn't around for that. Like I was like not really a part of it. And I was solely working for Emerald Cup at the time. And I busted my ass to go up to that Ego Clash when it was up in the hills in that cave. And I stayed for the whole thing. And I watched the awards. And then I drove back to Sonoma and woke up hella early the next day and worked Emerald Cup. Because I felt like loyalty to Brandon after like helping him get that shit going and knowing what it was going to turn into, And I busted my ass and I like made no money and I don't care and I wouldn't do anything different, And like, I think that that's something that people in this industry need to learn. Sometimes you got to pay your way. Sometimes
100%.
you gotta, like earn your spot. And sometimes it's straight up with fucking money. Like no bull. If that's what you got to offer and that's what you're good for, like just accept that you can get something out of this that's not monetary. Like people know me as one of the homies that was involved with these things. Like that means more to me. Like, than any amount of money that would have been able to be paid to me back then, You're built with something.
Were you able to attend any of the Legends dinners overseas when you were traveling to Spanish?
I wasn't. I never got able to attend them. I was talking to Amit and Mila at the Hash Holes and Donuts party we had in Spain. Shout out Kieran and all those guys at Cookies for letting us have that there. But Mila and Amit were just like, you would have fit in there. You would have fucking loved it, but you didn't deserve to be there. It was like this whole thing. Like, it wasn't like an ego thing. It was like, but they were like, the way those dinners were, the way Marcus put those dinners together, like, I really wish I could have been there for those, There's some legendary, like, stories I've heard about those parties,
For sure. So, once after your second or third year with Emerald, was it second or third year with Emerald Cup that you sort of stepped away from heading up the glass and
I think I did 4 years. I think I did 3 or 4 years with them in total. And it was when I worked the one with Puffco, when I helped Puffco and Roger and everybody come in. And shout out Chad at Emerald Cup, one of the hardest working people there. He was one of the ones that him and Kevin had started a conversation about bringing Puffco into the mix because, the corporate people at Emerald Cup were like trying to change some of the structures and like, how much money they were spending for some stuff. And we're so big. We're the Oscars of weed. Why can't we get someone to pay for this? And, I just kind of at that point, there was so much of that talk that it just made sense to like bring someone like Roger in to be able to like handle that and actually benefit from it. Instead of having someone just pay for shit and just be a sponsor, like it was like Roger made the most sense because he could come in and like the brand could grow like into the Emerald Cup and do like have a good, their activation that they had that first year was really awesome. And I think that that's something that benefits Emerald Cup as well as it benefits Puffco. And so if you're ever in a situation with festival management where you can kind of see two parties benefiting, it's like if y'all are into sports and you can see both teams becoming better after the trade, it was like, all right, this is not going to hurt either one of you and it'll be better for you. And I guess the way Emerald Cup was looking at some of the like $70,000 to $80,000 glass bills I was trying to throw at them, they were like, this is going to be cheaper for us, And so I knew it wasn't talked about, but that was the last Emerald Cup before COVID, And I knew that by setting up Puffco within that mix, I probably wasn't going to be necessary the next year, That Kevin and Chad had a really good rapport and that the powers that be would definitely be asking Chad, can you handle this without Mike? And I knew it. And me and Chad talked about it. And I was like, listen, if this is where this thing goes, that's fine. I've done the Snodgrass Award. I've kind of done what I've wanted to do, Like this is
the only constant is change.
Yeah, this is time for me to keep it moving. And this was never a permanent thing, but I feel like I helped you guys. My career was definitely helped from that. And so we kind of like parted ways. And it was during the pandemic, that it was just like, you know, not to make anybody look bad or anything. It was the pandemic. Like there was no events happening. You know, it wasn't like people were fired or I was told we don't need you anymore. It was just the event ain't fucking happening the way it was. And so there isn't money for a lot of things. And that's when I really pushed with the art. Honestly, I had been doing it on the side at the time. People at Emerald Club didn't even know I was doing it. You know, I think I had like a couple paintings that I'd sold, small pieces that I did. I think a mood mat, and I think maybe like a drop with Zach P or something at that point, but nothing too serious, you know?
So when as you were coming up and on the lot, connected with all these glass blowers, and then eventually selected for handling the awards and the glass awards for Emerald, like who were you collecting at that time? Like were you a collector?
Oh, man, I could tell you a story about a storage unit in New Jersey that had a couple big Yush bubblers, a couple J. Lee bubblers, a lot of banjo pieces, a couple Ezra pieces that I'm really sad that storage unit got robbed. And what they robbed it for was my sneakers. I had a massive sneaker collection at the time, and that was one of 4 storage units I had in Jersey. They took me for the whole 2005 season of SBs. Ooh, still hurts. I could buy a house with that shit right now. They took me for a Gibson LP 100. They took me for a bunch of shit, but they were after the shoes. It was 2 fucking dudes that looked a little shady at the storage unit. They probably had weed they were storing there. No judgment. I was storing weed at another one. But that was my sneaker storage. It was a climate-controlled unit. And the only way you could steal from my unit was if you had a unit in that building, you know? And so there was a case. I had an insurance claim, but they never figured out who exactly it was. Like, these cats did a good job. Like, they blurred the cameras, did a whole thing, went into like 10 units and figured out a way to get in there and not get traced. I had, oh God, like 4 big, like the big long cases that we used to keep the pipes in. Shout out Matt Schlade. I know he had a storage unit taken not too long ago. Sad stories. But that shit happened, like in the glass history of, that's how they disappeared. People are like, where are all your pipes, Mike? I had all these Galb pipes, Steve Galb from Buttermilk Glass out East Coast. I was collecting him a lot back in the day. My buddy Lord, who back in the time was Sin Glass. I had like a couple Elbow Pickles, a bunch of shit in that fucking storage unit, and it got snatched. That's when I stopped collecting. And it wasn't until I started working with Emerald Cup again that I was like, oh man, this is the void in my life I've been missing. Going out and getting new pipes and, like making glass and making shit. There you go. Shout out me. But this pipe that I almost knocked over before, this is a wormhole that JD made me to resemble the trophies from my first year at Emerald Cup.
That's where I've seen that before.
So this was like the style of trophy that he made that first year, but then he gave me the San Francisco Giants colors on mine. I had
These are available. These are available on Lockcommy's website.
Not yet. You guys got the
not yet, but they will be
next Saturday. Next Saturday, big hash drop.
Big hash drop.
Yeah, man.
Might I say real quickly, this is genius because I never thought of this, but this is genius because you can now, when you put it in there, if you put it in correctly, you can give motion.
Yes.
And you can actually wash it real quick.
Yeah. It's like,
so shout out to you for this. Thank you so much. Just kind enough to send these to the office. So I want to say thank you. You're the man.
Jameson, yours got held in customs.
They're looking at it. They're like, damn, this is fire.
No, I got an email and they were like, what was the art? What was something with when I sent it on my Shipping Easy platform, like the customs form didn't get properly filled out, so it should be showing up soon.
It'll be back here when it'll be.
My apologies. I tried to get it there in time.
You can use mine when you come to the States.
I will. I will be using yours. So who?
But those are who I collect. My Gong is probably my favorite pipe maker nowadays. I got my Gong over here.
What kind of motherships do you have?
I got my.
What do you got over there?
I had an exosphere. Some kid broke it at a party. I had a Taurus. I had a like a proto Taurus.
Nice.
When those first came out, that was like a whole new world, you know.
Like a short fatty or
short fatty.
Short fatties are sick.
They were so sick.
It's my favorite pipe is a short fat Taurus.
Yeah, man. There's some things about pipe design, bro. Shout out Skelly and the boys for doing that little like reel they made. Excuse me, where they were like doing all the old dab like attachments.
Oh, bro, the evolution of the whole thing was so sick.
I've always wanted to see a glass show. Like,
you know what I didn't see though? I didn't see Dougie's flip top with the hat.
Oh, the hat.
That would have upped it one little bit.
I remember smoking too much holy water. Shout out Eric Ward and Niz with Nectar's Collective. That was the first time I'd ever seen the baseball cap back and forth, and I was crying for like 5 minutes from this massive like pour, a holy water terp pour. There
was a period of time when
that's what I remember the cap as. You know,
holy water and flux came together. So Flux was feeding material and Eric was processing.
Yep.
And it was just jars of fucking the weirdest shit you've ever seen.
I remember those days. I remember that because I know Eric from Fish Tour. Like,
okay.
I know
Eric's a power wook. We just hung out with Eric at Melting of the Heads.
Oh yeah,
he came up. Yeah.
Eric is okay. Like, we could take a little moment to talk about Eric. Eric deserves a lot of cred. He almost
died. Talk about Eric.
He almost died.
He blew. Yeah. Yep.
You know, and not a lot of kids today understand him and know like who he was and where he was. And the funny thing is like all hash makers were friends with all hash makers. Like I made Bubble, he made fucking BHO, and like we traded our hash. You know,
he's making rosin now.
Yeah, I know.
Dude,
and they laughed at me. Those motherfuckers laughed at me. I walked up into Niz's house and I told all of them, I said, this slab right here is your future. And they all told me I was full of shit. And now here we are, you know, so it's all love.
Dude, it was so great watching. So, you know, Eric, how awkward and shit he is. It was great watching him come into Melting of the Heads and just like, he's fucking pulling out all kinds of shit and liquids and this. And
he's a wook. He's a hash wook.
Just going off.
He might be the OG hash wook. He might be like the original. He's a suit, and he'll like hacky sack with you. Like he's a super wook. But it was so funny watching him just like integrate into the new hash world, because all these kids are just rosin, melt, this, that. They own fucking swab companies. Like, you know, it was just this crew of them. And Eric was just like sat down, and the next thing you know, it was like fucking there he is, just pouring jars into fucking bangers, and everybody was having a blast. But it was good to see him though. He's really settled into Washington. Yeah, he says he's about to come back down here.
He's coming back down,
and be in both I just saw him at the Phil Les show. I took my daughter to a Phil Les show at Stern Grove in San Francisco, and I saw him. And that was like one of the highlights of the people I ran into. You know, I didn't expect to see him there, you know, because I know he's been up in Washington busting his ass.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
he's the hash.
He's partnered with Little.
Yeah.
With Michael guy. Now.
Of course.
Little guy.
And little guy, shout out Peasy. Shout out Peasy.
Oh, got to shout out Peasy. Peasy's getting to come to Legends this year. Peasy didn't get to go to Legends last year. He was so
upset about it. He's coming this year.
He was very angry with me last year.
He was upset about it. He made it known to me that he was upset.
He called everyone. He had
all this fucking shit that he wanted to show all the guys that he wanted to watch.
Yep.
Peasy's the man. Like, we're not.
Even through all that, Peasy never called me and told me no fresh frozen. He still left all of his avenues open even after he wasn't invited to Legends. And then this year he's coming for sure. He'll be there for
Peasy is probably one of the I've got the most respect for him. He probably is like pissed at me. I have some designs I need to get to him, and I'm slacking on some shit. If you're watching Peasy, you can laugh right now. But he's introduced me to more people that have been like fruitful to like other parts of my careers than probably any other one person. Dude, a lot of cats don't know. Like,
he's the Kevin Bacon.
I don't care if it upsets anybody, but he started Guild. Fuck all those other guys. And he started so many different brands and did so many things that like these cats can say they did this and they did that, but honestly, without his energy and his connection to the culture, you don't fucking exist. Like, Ty Dolla $igns was sleeping on my man's couch at one point in his career.
Mhm.
If that lets you know anything about who Peasy is to help people get to where they need to go, like, you know, got a lot of love.
But Peasy does have a little bit of the Eeyore syndrome.
Oh yeah, Loaf with the loaf.
Yeah, I'm like, dude,
his
what?
nickname is Loaf. You know.
But now he's kind of broken out of that in the last few. Now he's obsessed with his lawsuits, but I think he's made some great progress on those. So he's a lot happier.
I hope so. I think for him, it's really like, it's not like he needs people to know things. It's like for him, he needs to feel like he honored himself, I guess. Like, you know, with like respecting his own, having his own self-respect, you know? And
so Peasy is Parker, who's a good friend of ours. He's actually a very integral part of a bunch of all these different companies.
So many.
And different industries, like music industry, cannabis industry, fucking graffiti. Like, dude, known everywhere all over the country. Like Parker's, and is Parker from Utah with Michael and all those guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he's always told me it's like he's a Utah bum.
He grew up with Little.
Bum. Yeah, Utah.
Little and Red and all those dudes are all from that.
And they grew up with all the pro skiers and snowboarders from that era, like that came out of Utah. Like they were all best friends with them. You know, Parker was
the biggest criminals I know are from Utah.
Yeah. Parker was like, "Mom, I'm not going to church today. I'm going to hitchhike to the mountain to ride."
Yeah.
So
that whole fucking crew.
You know?
Well, they're all friends with like a shitload of pro snowboarders. Like they're this weird. That whole crew is this weird fucking, and we know why. We know the real reason why.
That's why.
But that's what they did was just fucking woohoo! Like those boys.
I think that's funny because like we all like I'm tapped in with a lot of, you know, guys that are retired pros or still riding for brands, and yeah, man, a lot of them were smoking weed and hash, and many of them weren't, you know, but like that was definitely part of the culture, you know. And the guys who had the weed and threw the parties and whatever, even the dudes who didn't smoke were like tight with them and went and hung out with them and like went to the events with them. It's definitely
especially trade shows.
Yeah.
Like if you went to like ASR or Vegas,
I mean,
San Diego, those were like just the greatest parties ever. And I would just bring shitloads of weed and be like,
got what's the fucking skate mafia, you know, and you've got Preebs, you know, and all those dudes from that era.
John Montesi from West Side Skate, like all those cats. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember who I was. I remember coming out to a house to get weed in Oceanside, California, like 12, 13 years ago. And I walked in and I was like, oh my God, half the Osiris team is in this house. And then the dude I was picking up the weed from was like one of the riders. And I was like so confused because
why is Muska here?
And he was laughing and he's like, you know who all those homies are out there. And I'm like, yeah, I know who those fucking homies are. And he's like, you actually know some of them. I'm like, I know. So it was like, you know, it's fun now going back and like looking at like the homies that are like in their 30s and 40s and being like, you were the big guy in this party, I remember. And like, you know, so seeing Preebs doing what he's doing now is like fucking awesome, you know, because like that's who he is. It's who he always was, you know. But yeah, that was the thing. Like weed was always in all the skate competitions, like all the events,
everything.
All the trade shows, the fashion shows, Agenda or Magic, if you went out to those.
Snowboarding too, like it's a big part of like all of that industry.
That's how I met Greg, who at the time was like, I met him on Deadlot at like, I think he was leaving Burton and eventually starting Camp High when Camp High Collective first started. I had done a couple designs with them in the beginning. That was kind of like my first foray into like doing graphic design work for fashion brands and shit.
Yep.
But Greg's an OG like party animal, deadhead snowboarder. You know, the Vermont scene was like totally him, you know. Ivan Koloff on Instagram, you know. He took the name of an old fucking wrestler from like back in the day. It's fucking he's a jokester, complete prankster, you know. But like total snowboard official corporate creative director of Burton. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I mean, what other way would you be able to travel in expensive places for most of the year unless you were a grower that was, you know, doing that kind of shit or moving a lot of product and doing it? And it was like, you know,
the legendary story of Vincent in Amsterdam, the ski bum, the legendary story of the fucking of Ariane and like his father-in-law, so to speak, and like all of that. Like, bro, they like track the dude down because he grows the best fucking weed, but he grows only half the year, so we can go fucking ski bum it out the whole rest of the year. It's I mean, it's part of the culture, like sincerely part of the culture.
Oh yeah,
all
no, it's big.
intertwined, all of it, and that's why like homies like Parker, we talk about him. It's like he's like that version of like a Vincent, but like in the American days, like tapped in with like underground hip hop, rap was
Everything.
his hip hop name. I mean, like doing fucking
Fashion, music, action sports, like
all
ridiculous Rolodex, that motherfucker. But
yeah, so like that's actually how I know him. When I first met him, I had a jar of headbands that Ward had given me. And he was like, "Where did you get this jar from?" Like, that's how we became friends. He was like, "I know this jar. Like, there's only 2 other people in the state who have this jar." And I just looked at him and I was like, "Fader," because we used to call Ward Fader back then. Darth Fader. And I'm like, "Fader." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, it's the right jar." And that was in a room of like High Times people, and they were like, "Who the fuck's this random dude who has AJ Sour and the jar that made Parker freak out?"
Yeah. It's all about the secret shit, man.
Well, and it's just like all these kind of scenes and cultures are consistently connected. Like everything is all looped in. I think that's a reason why like my art has gone where it is because like I represent like a lot of these younger cats that don't know if they can make it, don't know if they have what it takes, and I'm telling them they do because you're the only one to answer to. Like look at me. I had all these jobs, I plugged away for all these years and eventually ended up here, but like I was probably always supposed to be here. Just enjoy the journey, just enjoy the journey and bust your ass,
Yeah, don't spend your time worrying about what you're going to be. Spend your time just being what you are. Fucking just enjoy yourself. Rip dabs, melt face, catch the sunrise, catch the sunset, eat good, sleep well, make yourself a little nervous and anxious, get through that shit. Don't be such a pussy. Give a lot of love, give hugs, say I love you, do all that shit, man. And
Thank you,
good
Bubba.
hash. Good fucking hash is very important too.
It is. It's probably the funny thing that's like really tapped me into even fashion and sneakers now is that I'm the dude that'll get some of these high-end designers, their crews, their number 1s, their number 2s on their team. I'm the one that'll get them like the Puffco, sent to them. I'll convince them, "Hey, let me get this thing and send it to you. Let me send you some hash. Let me get you on one of these fucking products. Let me smoke some hash with you. Let me get you a fucking hash hole from Fidelity. Let me like show you kind of why I'm so into this and not just smoking flower and why it's so connected to psychedelics and all this shit." And I mean, bro, Brotherhood of Eternal Sunshine, they smuggled hash, they raised money, they gave away acid. Like they built art galleries to house artists that they were friends with that would normally have never made any money or any career, and they put their art up on a fucking wall, and all the other acid and hash trappers fucking bought it. What the fuck do you think this scene is? Like, to me, as long as we can look back, we can know where we're going forward. Like, we are still, like, descendants of a hash and acid culture, and no matter what you want to look at it and how you want to slice it up, whether it's Burning Man, whether it's Fish, whether it's Grateful Dead, these young kids going out to goose shows, going to just straight up weed events, going to sessions, hanging out at Main Circle for every Main Circle party if you live in Portland, like literally that is the same. It's all tapped in. Like the kids going to the skate competitions, like Love Park and the Brooklyn Banks don't exist anymore, but we have hell of these little rooms and studios where all this energy is like still massively interacting, You got clubs out in New York like the Astor Club. Shout out Ben, Matt, and Josh. Those guys have always been really good to me and a lot of people in the culture, giving them a kind of little platform to jump off from in the New York space within music, food, fashion culture, sneaker culture. It's important to kind of remember that that's like what grows this shit, Like we want to have more hash to smoke. We want to have more pipes. We want to see more people have careers. And that's really like, I don't know. I think that's like what really pushes me with my art is trying to like funnel kids from one scene to another, letting them realize that they're actually totally part of the same community. Because I feel like all these kids are all just like I was when I was young. they're all searching community. Like we all want to have like a belonging, a place where we all link up.
Like sesh culture.
Yeah,
It's
sesh
like that
culture.
new kind of-
I mean, all of it, like sitting around a table, like that's still attached to like the old ways, you know? I mean, I think like Deppy really does it up with the fucking eye to eye pieces and like just bringing like the humor and the kind of like actual personal connection to like,
dude, that piece, I've never seen anyone, I've never seen two human beings get on that piece and not die laughing, especially if Deppy's there, because he's like, let's go. Dude, there's a video somewhere of me and that asshole. And he's like, let's take a dab on it. I'm like, all right. And I'm like looking down and he's all, and I can't even fucking, like, I can't continue with the dab. I can't do anything because it's too funny.
he really is. He's one of those homies that's like, let's hug for long enough for the oxytocin to kick in. Let's like really engage eyes long enough for our souls to connect. Like, he doesn't want to just like look inside your window. He wants to like go in there and taste the apple pie.
He wants to look in the closet. He wants to use the stove.
Yeah, like and respectfully and rightfully so. Like, we share so much with each other. We can't share a look. We can't share a little insight into our souls. But that is like it's like that's the whole culture for me, is like prankster culture. You know, keeping it funny, keeping it light.
Fuckery, constant fuckery.
Yeah,
very important.
That's
really
like
important. Male camaraderie. The lubrication for male camaraderie is fuckery. It's definitely like like when we were up at Melting of the Heads, I've said this before, the shit that got talked at that judges table, it was just like,
I wish I could have been there,
destroying each other with bullshit and fucking just throwing it out there at fucking.
I gotta say,
ruthless shit.
I hoped that these kind of events would become more the commonplace, and that was what, not to take it back all the way, but just to shout back out to like, that's what the Ego Clash's spirit was like. There's no other cup that has this, so let's kind of start this energy. And now you have Melting of the Heads, which is just a different introspective version of that, and that's like beautiful. Like you like need these kind of. It's not about judging ourselves, really. It's not, because people get misunderstood with the competition sense. We do that because that's the culture, that's the nature of the beast, and we actually want to like get together and hash it out, pun intended. And we want to like just throw it all down and see what settles. And when you lose that, that's when it gets awkward and people are like, this award was bought, this and that. But
it's part of that male competitiveness.
Yeah, well, if you can get back to just those old dinners, what Mila and Amit used to say, what they told me was that you would go to these dinners and literally Mila was like, there would be the friend that you saw and you had an argument. She's so funny with her. I'm not going to try to impersonate her accent, but she's like, you would have your friend that you ran into and you did not like because you had a disagreement the last time you saw them. And their hash was better than yours. But inside that building, and maybe only in that building for some of these people's egos, you would be like, my shit's garbage. Yours is good.
Yep.
Fucking A. And like the fuckery, if you will, the kind of like back and forth, the jabbing, was like, Amit was like, that was my favorite part. Because Amit's like, I wasn't really the hash maker. I was more the broker. I was the guy who got invited. I was the guy who helped put all these seed pieces together. And Amit's the man. The little chief is legendary homie. Blessed to call him a friend. But that guy, he's like, Mike, I needed tobacco. And they used to talk shit. And they would say, only me and Milo were allowed to have tobacco inside. But let me tell you, they didn't just let us have tobacco. They let us have the bag of shit that came with it. And it would just be them. Marcus, like, you guys get enough tobacco yet? Like, it would just be jabbing. Like,
talking
all night.
Shit the whole time.
Jabbing.
It's like a hash humility.
Mila, this hash is really good. Can you smell that? There's a little tobacco in it? It's just like jabbing. So that's
we still do it. Yeah.
They still do
exists. And on this podcast,
Like, for me, that's the thing. Like, that I'm proud of Brandon for having an event that has that. I'm proud of Melting of the Heads for having that. I hope that more events can realize, like, you have to get these judges that actually fucking know. When I was working with Emerald Cup, that was one of the big things that I helped them with, was like, you got to get some more females. You got to get some more of these. You got to get some mouths. Like, I don't want to do the judging because I know too many of these brands, but you got to get some opinionated people in there. Like, and Nick T is a great one. But like, you needed Teddy, Alien Labs, to get in there with some fucking hash. You needed some of these guys who are like, they just will say what they want. They'll say what they think. They'll fucking talk shit, and it's what we need.
Well, they know what they're talking about too. They know the difference between. They know the
Smoked enough
characteristics
hash.
of. They know, yeah, like you understand what it like. This year for Legends, only the makers or the judges. That's it. It's them and like 5 people, including
Yeah, I
deputies
think
or judges.
I think that's something you should, like you just said that on here, but like definitely hit that up on your page and stuff, and have a little moment where you let people know, because I think with that being a new format, Legends is definitely more of a well-rounded kind of event that way. I think
It's a different experience.
We talked about this privately on a phone call. We were talking about Legends this year, and I got some fun art planned. I got some good ideas for that shit. But we talked about this where it was like a lot of people didn't know, what exactly was happening. And that's messed up, because that's like, they didn't know the old dinners, and that explains a lot. Like, if you didn't know about the old dinners, that's okay. Some of us weren't even fucking old enough or allowed to get to those dinners, or able, or even knew about them. Some of these cats are like 23 making the best hash in the world, 25. There was no chance they were going to get to any of those dinners, but they don't even know about them.
And
that's
that
something
whole dinner was just one page or one fold up that was like Legends of Hash, but what year? And then it's like, open it up, and it would have like some information that was cultural about hash and some region or something. And then that was it. There was no explanation. It was just, you're in the room and, oh, hey, what's up? And everyone would go to Marcus. Like, yeah, there was, and we try to keep it in the same spirit of that, is what I guess I'm trying to say. And now it's like, there's
we're
still
in a new
no
world.
place. Well, here's the thing. Back then, you had the Dutch government, and you had to keep it from the Dutch government. In so many ways nowadays, we have to make sure that we keep the event and things about the event private enough, because there is the DCC. There are these entities that don't want to, or that want to know a lot about a private dinner. And it's like, it's a private dinner. It's a private event where adults are able to come to in a legal state, and we can come together and have a good time. Like, it follows all laws, but it's not.
It's like, you want to be able to explain to them, like, you guys need these events to happen. Like, you want to make all this money. You want to have all this shit popping. You need us to stir it up in a room and then like broadcast. It needs to happen.
What I want to tell the DCC is like, this is like the Elks Club, man. Like,
yeah,
that's what this is. This is a cultural component of hashish. That's a dinner. That's what it is, and it's a celebration where people come together. But my point is that we have to like we can't make a website and be like, hey, here's all the, it has to be where it's all communicated directly from me to the hash maker. And what happens when that's the case is that a lot of the time, depending on when you talk to that hash maker, depending on whether there's a notepad in front of them, things like that, if they're not keeping notes and taking notes, then a lot of information doesn't really get collected. And it's sort of done that way because it's Legends. It's like, there's no flyer like, you're like, oh, honey, we've been invited to Legends. Like, that's not how it happens.
No, it was kind of like you had to already be in Amsterdam. You were kind of needed to be in the know, and someone gave you the little flyer, Well,
you had to have good hash, and you had to be in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And that was really what it took. It was like, if you've had enough, and then after a while, people started bringing enough good hash to possibly be able to go. And, and I remember there was years when Marcus just walked from booth to booth and was like, what do you got? All right, here you go. And just did that, it was like, he'd walk around and like see puffs of smoke and fucking go over there with, and dude, he'd be there with Sam the Skunk Man, and Sam would come up and rudely interrupt whatever you were doing and insult you. And then you would show him whatever you had, and he would be like, that's fucking trash. Try this. And then fucking, you'd take like 5 hits off of his pipe and be black. It would like melt, and you'd just be blasted off your mind. And you'd be like, who the fuck is this dude? That's what I remember. And it was very disorganized, but somewhat organized in the sense of like where it was. And the biggest thing about it was most of the time you weren't invited. Like, that's what it was. It was like, oh, all those crazy heads get together and go to this fucking like cloaked hash dinner. And that was what Legends was. It was like, and then when I first got to go, it was exactly that. It was like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. Don't do any of those things, you get kicked right out. It was like all these fucking things. And I remember sitting there and being like, this is fucking like, Okay, well, I get. And I was with Don and Aaron from DNA. That's how I got invited the first time. And, I remember being like, oh shit, it's a big deal, but I'm not a hash maker or a breeder or
So
one of these crazy smugglers, and I get to be here, and that was kind of like the cool thing about it. But I did know Marcus, and I know Sam from him walking around being crazy and shit. But no, it's a different event. It's a totally different experience. It is part of the culture. It definitely leads back into it. The fact that we have anything to do with it, me and Kevin, like, we're grateful that we get to be part of that or a conduit. Yeah, but it has to change in order to be here. Like, you have DCC, you have fucking all these things you have to deal with, and then it's like, where are you going to put it on? Are you going to do it in NorCal, where we felt like after we did the SoCal one and we went to NorCal, every fucking person that we talked to, we did a lot of research online. I did, and then when I'd call the person and try to talk to them, the fucking price would double because it was a cannabis event. And it's like, in LA, that doesn't happen. No one gives a fuck. They're like, okay, little weed dude, have a good time, fucking enjoy yourself. Like,
so
there's reasons why.
91 Club,
Oh, 91 Club for sure. Like, that was, that whole relationship, man, that whole relationship was so dope. Like, we were talking to Dan before that, and then Dan's like, hey, I got this brand new venue. And I think we were like the first cannabis event that they'd done there or anything. So we sort of helped christen it, and and they've done so much since, bro.
Now he's got the other side of the building.
He's got the other side now. Yep.
Big ups to Jimmy Devine throwing his events. And
that was a blast, man. Did you go to that, or were you?
I didn't go. I wasn't able to get down for it. I got the second kid coming. The second daughter comes in 3 weeks, depending on when she decides to show up. So it's been a little touch and go on when I leave the past few months. So I haven't gone to. I would have loved to go to the Heads. I would have loved to go to that because I love Jimmy. I love supporting him. He's just a true star in our industry, just kind of creating his own path as it goes, and really inspiring a lot of young writers and a lot of young cats that are just fans. I mean, he is just a fan of weed.
He's like Cheech and Chong and had a baby with Seth Rogen,
but he
made Jimmy Devine.
But he is the one that is most suited to just be like an official fan and like turn that into.
He rages.
Yeah, and he's really like showed a lot of these kids like, all right, you're really passionate about this. Like, there's a career for you, whether it's growing or making hash or any of these things. But like, look at me. They gave me a job. That's what he always says. Yeah. He's like, look at me. They took my stories,
Well, he showed people a path, like created a door.
He embodies the Wook culture,
Oh, he's a super crispy Wook for sure. There's no question.
I love you, Jimmy.
Are you happy, Wookerson, with the direction that the culture is going in? Like, be it cannabis culture in general, glass culture, Wook culture. Do you feel as though the direction is a good one?
That's a tough one to completely tackle, but I think that, overall, you've got to put more education out. I think that if we can get to a place where there's more people that are pushing like education and like sharing knowledge, look at kind of the fashion industry with a kind of very big racial segregation. Virgil Abloh gets some shots. Virgil gets in. He represents skateboarding, DJing, graffiti culture. He represents sneakers and all these things, but he's also a black kid from like a city, and he comes into this world and it's like, you got to open your eyes. It's not just the color thing, but anybody who's not from the normal, pathways to get into these spots, it's just a myth that they can't be the best at that job, that they can't be, so I think putting out that education and leaving out those cheat codes for the next kids coming, if we can just get more cats doing that, I think we're in a good place, as good as we can be. And I really truly believe like we're still in the halfway mark of a 100-year arc of psychedelic history that's trying to really change. You've got going back to like the 60s and the Brotherhood and Albert Hoffman and all of these scientists really pushing for psychedelic medicines to be created. A lot of big bankers and investment people realizing like maybe there is something to this versus pharmaceutical world. And now we're at this mark of like the halfway part. when you have these epic changes in history, whether it was through dynasties or through kingdoms, it was around a century, and it's about 3 sets of generations that have to handle all that work. You have the ones that start the work. You'll have the ones that finish it. We're all alive in the part of this culture in this generation that's like, we're in the middle. There's a lot of us that have to like defeat our own egos because we're not going to be there at the end. We're not going to see where all this work goes. We're the ones that have to do all this work for all these years, take it from the ones that gave it to us, hand it off to these next kids, and be able to just walk away and be like happy with that. You know, so we won't really know if all the work we did got to where it was supposed to go. But I feel like as long as we leave like that sentiment behind and like put as much education as we can and leave as many cheat codes, as many doors open, like I don't care if some kid sees my 3 spiraled eyes and wants to just straight copy that. Bro, if that gets you started drawing and making merch and you have a career after this and you support your kid as an artist and you're able to be a dad or a mom like that, fucking A, man, like I got to be happy about that, you know? Like, so if you can just kind of take yourself away from it and it's really about the culture, as long as this shit survives, like after me, if you get enough of kids like seeing that those are the idols that they look up to are the ones that aren't like, I drive this Lambo and I drive this Ferrari. Like, yeah, you might have those things, but what message did you put out to the kids? Like the kid after you, is he just like, I got to have all these things in order to do what that guy did? Or are you going to be able to say, you can have whatever the fuck you want. As long as this part of the culture is what you're pushing, you're going to be fine. You're going to have a career. You're going to have a life. You're going to be able to do pretty much anything you want. Because if this sentiment is felt, like, I think we'll be okay, you know?
It needs, the culture needs to be taken care of, you know, like it needs to be protected in some ways. And it's definitely, what's cool about that culture is that it is dead culture, hash culture, glass culture, cannabis culture. Yeah. It's all these things that sort of fill this music. It's all these things that sort of filled, and then music sort of brought it all together and brought us all to these places. And then the drugs kind of opened everyone up. And then the ways to use the drug, you know, the terpene analysis equipment, the glass, the, you know, whether you're into it for how it looks, started, how it functions.
Like, our culture started the SC labs. Come on, wink, wink. You know, like all these things were created like from inside. There were visionaries in our scene that like had these ideas to like push these things. So it's all still part of that wheel. And I feel like, yeah, we are really the ones in this part of we're the generation.
Oh, you mean Steep Hill Labs?
Oh, but all of them, Steep Hill, SC, all of them. Like Steep Hill is more of a wink, wink, I guess. You know, that's even more. But that's a whole other story for another podcast. But like the all of these different things that are on the more official, professional level, but they came out of the culture. And they came out of like psychedelic shit, you know?
What I think is so important and unique about this culture, and you cannot be compared to any, but when you do make a comparison, an imperfect one, to say prohibition of alcohol in Canada, for example, you had the Seagram family, and the Seagram family were gangsters. Like they were
their stuff.
They got shit done. And 100 years later, they're one of the most respected families in Canada, and they've got commercials about, you know, with their families like driving liquor and stuff, you know, 100 years ago, and championing that outlaw culture. And you know, and whether they're doing it now and they've leaned into it or not, but I remember vividly a commercial at one point like that. And I think that we need to know that there's a risk that 100 years from now, the whole outlaw, pirate, acid, psychedelic culture could be just bleached out of cannabis to where people are participating in cannabis and have no idea that the deep roots of civil disobedience and outlaw pirate culture that got this to where it is. So it's so important for tastemakers like yourselves, Wookerson and Addison, where you're bringing together the community and just more of these community events to champion that side of the industry, so it doesn't get lost inside a distillate and botanical terpene flavored vape pen like that.
The secret ingredient is crime. That's the secret ingredient all the time. For some reason, the secret ingredient is crime, and that's
it's not.
Sum
you
it
know,
down into one sentence, like
it. You know, the kids that know me as like, oh, he used to be, you know, these things, like it definitely aids and abets a certain level of appreciation for the art that I'll put out there. And they know, they're like, he's representing a certain part of like his path and his youth and his culture that I do believe and feel was, you know, a necessary, powerful thing to have, you know, moving forward. Like that, if you didn't have that kind of sentiment, you know, taken with you, that everything would be whack and like it would never go mainstream. I mean, look at anything, whether it's skateboarding or sneakers or any of these things that were like part of a certain, whether inner city or like suburban culture, any of these things that blossomed into this mainstream like vortex. Yeah, man, there has to be those cultural icons and those people that were kind of the outlaws, the badasses, the ones that people told not to do it. You know, the Jake Carpenters.
They had something to lose.
Yeah,
that's
don't
the
create
thing that no one
snowboard.
talks about. Is
Now
that like
we aren't going to let you
something-
on with snowboards, you know, like
Yeah, you had
have to make
something to
feet.
fucking lose.
Yeah,
Not only was what you were doing illegal, but you could get in a lot of trouble for what you did. And that's, you know, the thing nowadays that, like, I have a problem with the fact that there are people who make money in cannabis but never hung their dick in the electricity, like never really dealt with all of what it is, whether it was having a straight job and being involved in crime and keeping that private and whatever. They never did those things. And they have businesses that make money off of that culture, and they want to call themselves part of that fucking culture, but you're not part of that culture. You just make money off that culture.
yeah.
That would be like you and I being like, oh, I wasn't a university dude, but I made money off those university dudes. Like, you know, that's the same thing. And I get chapped hard on that shit. And I really only want to support and work with companies that are built around or have been involved in our culture and are part of our culture. And look, is that just me being proud of where I come from and where it comes from? There's part of that there, but there's also a part of like, who else would you give your consumerism to than the original people that built and put that together and navigated and went from when this was, you were an activist trying to get something legalized, then watched that activism turn into an industry and then became a part of that industry and became a business person. And those are the people that I want to support and I always try to get behind, as opposed to the guy that sits up on the hill with dad's money and walks on down and fucks them all because I invented X. And now everybody, it's like, okay, hey, you could be here, but you're not going to get me to be like, I don't have amnesia. I didn't bang my fucking head on a pound of hash and now I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like that's not how it works, dude. It's like I'm down with the people that earned it and built it and put it together and sacrificed and like suffered and dealt with and lost packs and did all this shit to get here, to be a part of this, because to me, that's who this is. That's who, if my son came to me tomorrow at 19, you know, next year at 19 and says, Dad, who do I purchase from in the cannabis industry? I'd be happy to be like, well, here you go. Here's this is who, and fucking Ted and this and that. And
it's
then from
fun
Glass,
to teach, man.
It's really man. It's like, that's the history that's aligned with the culture, you know? And like, if you don't know, if my son doesn't know that it's hash culture that drove Glass culture and vice versa, and now the banger culture is driving the fucking, and it's like, that shit's interesting because it is the culture. It's the detailed components that make up the history of that entire culture. And it's, you know, you make up a big part of that. Like you're one of those guys that takes bits and pieces of all of that culture and puts it together in the form of art and says, hey, whether it's you know, you can't smoke hash all day unless you start in the morning, or any of these things that you've put out or done that I think like is a big part of the culture now. It's like you're one of the guys that's talking about it because you've been there, and that's why I think you do have that success that you have, because any of these kids that, if they didn't know before this podcast or not, they can quickly understand like, oh shit, you know, Mike's been there fucking since, and they, oh, okay, like all these different things, like, and they get to really understand, like, and then they get to look at your art, then they get to enjoy it, and
sometimes it makes more sense. It makes more sense.
It has that relevance,
shit, for
you
sure.
know, it's real, and it's like, And when those kids go on your social media or any of that shit and they see you with X or Y, those are your friends. That's not you getting a picture with X or Y. You're part of that culture. And that's what I love about it is, and like me, even you and I, like we'd met before, but at Legends, it was like, we're like, oh, we're at work now. Oh, okay. It's like, oh, hey, how's it going? It's like, that was kind of the first time that I met you as the artist, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I met you with just Jersey Mike at DFO like years ago.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
I think I was like just starting with Emerald Cup maybe at the time or something, you know? Yeah, for sure. That's
a great event.
It's fun. Yeah, you know, DFO is the best. Shout out Abe, you know, the man. I think that like over the years, for me, it was like I was just always there. I was passionate about being there. And for anybody who's listening to me and thinking about how to get their shit out there, don't think about how to get your shit out there. Think about how to get you out there.
Just get out there. Yeah.
Go out there and just go to these events. And like, if you want to be somewhere, you might be able to finagle your way into it, you know, and like get somebody to get you into an event.
And when you get there, put your phone down. That's the other thing. When you get there, put your phone in your pocket and say hi to everybody like a social bird.
Really, it's something that like being a social butterfly will definitely help you with a lot of things down the road. And you never know what it's going to be, man. You meet somebody fucking 10 years before the real reason you were supposed to meet happens, you know? Yep. And that's happened to me so many times, especially in all these communities. I'm in one and then I'm in another and I'm like, oh, wow, there's the homie from the Agenda trade shows. He's now working with a homie who's now about to help a merch deal with Teddy at Alien Labs and like the homies at Broken Promises, and you're looking at them like that's the one homie he used to like model on Karmaloop and just really rip the game and like knows what he's doing and has like learned mistakes from anybody else who's done it. And homie Jason will pass down knowledge to anybody with a brand and like help them out. That's why when like Jameson, you asked me like, where is this culture going and stuff, and do I like it? I think we have some of these people that are really pushing and not just pushing for themselves. Like behind closed doors, I'm helping hella brands with artwork, all as many as I can in a sense, because I firmly believe that hash companies are the new skate companies. And I've always felt that. And it's something that you'll hear me harp about a lot if you're one of my friends to an annoying degree. But I feel like the merch that I make is me as an artist. I'm the skate company. My merch is like my trucks or my t-shirt or my hoodie. You know, Diamond Supply makes hardware. Nikki's making like the hardware, but the hoodies are selling, the sneaker collabs or what everyone remembers him by, like all these different things. And really, that's where I get inspired by with all my merch is all the skate companies and stuff that I worked with and hung around and was a fan of. They couldn't survive just selling the hardware or the trucks or the wheels or the deck. So they dropped shirts with funny images, Alien Workshop, those homies doing crazy little designs and like getting people tapped in with that culture. And then the skaters, you built up money. If I do what I want, right, I'll be sponsoring kids, you know? I'll have a skate team. I'll have a hash team. I'll have sponsored hash smokers that are like wearing the clothes and getting them fucking, you know, slurper sets and all that shit, getting them bangers made, getting them custom shit made and sponsoring their hash smoking careers. Because like, I feel like that's where this culture is going. I feel like a hash company is, to me, cooler than a lot of the fashion brands that I follow and I'm up on.
Look,
cooler than
hash is cooler than everything else. The hash is cooler than everything else. The biggest difference between the hash industry and the skate industry is that there aren't any illegal skate companies in the skate industry. That's what makes hash so much cooler. Is that, you know, there's rec and then there's traditional brands. And I fucking love that. Like, I love.
There's
and
also
traditional brands that go rec. Like, you know,
and that's like Jameson. That's like tapping into like, you know, like the same kind of alcohol culture of like outlaw vibes, where this culture is still very much like, oh, who's hot in the trap? Let's bring them to the shelf. And somehow we've managed in California, of all places, to be that place where it's like, oh, we're gonna kind of like close our eyes a little, like, okay, who's that on the shelf now? You know, and it's like, I think that,
or vice versa.
Yeah,
we're gonna go to the trap.
Yeah.
And be like, how many fucking boxes is that? Like,
yeah. Yeah,
I mean, what's
same. You know, hey,
yeah, that's
but
and
it's,
you know
it's
what?
something that,
One
like,
needs the other, which yeah, it's part of what culture is. That's it. Like, you know,
we're in
like
we're like in a
what's
recession. It's going to grow even faster too, in like its own crazy ways because of it. You know, it's just natural. That's what happens every time this shit happens in economy. Like cannabis culture, like blossoms somehow. You know, because people turn to the plants. People need the plants. Look how many of these fucking heady boys are growing cactus now. Like that wasn't happening before the pandemic. I had some plants. I got some plants in my office. You know, but all of a sudden,
these dudes are out capturing toads and shit, bro. Like, what are you
Yep.
talking about? These motherfuckers are these
Hey,
motherfuckers are going hard in the paint.
They listened to the plants. They got one of those little guardians in their life, and it fucking changed them. And I love it. It's fucking amazing. And it's like heady boys whose heady culture would normally be to take these plants and make them insane status symbols and like I have it and you don't. But they're not. They're like, yo, here's my homie. He's the plug. You could get one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is incredible.
It's so
you know?
cool.
Yeah.
So for
shout
me,
out to Skelly for blowing that shit up so hard.
you know,
like,
there's a few homies out there that definitely we always had plants in our feed, right? And then during the pandemic, you got like fucking Darren, Skelly and Darren together as homies, but Darren like collecting Dr. Romanelli for those who aren't following me.
Dr. Romanelli, yeah.
Darren like just massive amounts of plants and like it's totally reshaped his whole fucking artistic career. So if you can't see like the power of these plants in this culture, man, I just don't know. Fuck, I don't know what else we can show you, right? Like, I don't know what else the three of us can kind of put out there and talk about that, like, would prove that that shit's really where it's at. You just, like, this culture will be in that way if we can all kind of get more of that sentiment. Education, passing it on, sharing it. There will be jobs and careers. Don't worry about how you're going to make money off this guy. Oh, I introduced this guy to that guy. I need my $5 off that jar. Bro, just relax, man.
Start a management company.
Work harder. You want that $5. That's all I can tell you. Work harder.
Well, no, make it. I figured it out. It's not work harder. It's make it so that there's longevity to what you brought to the table to make your $5. Make it so that there's ongoing value that you provide to that deal.
Yes.
That makes it so that your $5 should continue to repeat.
That is a better
That's
definition
what the fuck
of
it is.
Work smarter.
That's what it is.
Into a more organized place where you're valuable. A lot of kids asking about how to stay relevant. Bro, I don't fucking know. I just know if I can continue to find a way to be useful, that someone will be able to use me. And if I don't have an ego about where I fit into that picture, and as long as I'm being used and put part of it, then I'll still be working and I'll still be relevant, I guess. But like, kids ask me that a lot. Like, how do you stay relevant? Like, how are you so relentless with putting shit out? Like, how are you all this? And man, it's just stay tapped in and it'll probably come if it's meant to come. But, that's a weird thing, right? Like how to kind of keep projecting and keep pushing it,
Well, always keep moving forward. That's what it is. Just keep going. Always keep fucking going forward.
Are you happy with what you're seeing in like the hash community as far as innovation, a move to commercialization? We're seeing a lot of resin blending and that's actually taking a lot of cups. Is that something that you're about, or do you have any opinions on? Oh, you're muted.
So the resin blending, and when we're talking about that, just to clarify, you mean like, putting two strains in together and making a new batch?
Correct. Either pre or post wash.
It's complicated for me,
He's a purist.
Let's
talk. I'm a little bit
I
of a
love
purist.
This topic.
I knew you were a purist. No.
So I'm a little bit of a purist, and here's why. You're never going to make that batch again.
No.
That batch is never going to happen again. So on some levels, I fucking love it. It's unicorns, okay? But I want to do my own cup in the future, and I'll tell you a little bit of joke about it. It's a little bit of a joke of mine, but me and a buddy of mine, Hashy Mike, terp preservation, we used to have this talk back in the day. It was more his idea than mine, but I really adopted it. I've always thought the hash that wins your cup, and he too, should be something I can go buy on a shelf right afterwards or out of somebody's bag, traditionally. Now,
that's marketing.
Kids make the special batch for the cup to win. My question is, what did you make what energy did you use and spirit did you use to make that jar? And do you make all your jars like that?
Yeah.
And if so, that's okay that you made that special batch. It's whatever. Like if you're a guy who does blends all the time and you only sell your, certain head size and you take your other head size and put it in edibles and you're always like religiously about certain things, bro, I don't care what you put in the cup because you're kind of small batch magic all around, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the cat who has freezers full, and there's several of these cats that have fucking freezers full and they're just buying up hella hash and storing it and making blends and making all kinds of colorful fucking wraps and who knows what. I'm never going to get that hash ever again in my fucking life after that drop. It's never going to be the same as that one blended time. So I'm weird about the cups. Like, I always thought a kid should just put hash out and then I go grab the hash and judge it. That's the cup. So I've always wanted to do a fucking shelf cup where I straight tell you that I'll be buying hash during these 4 weeks in traditional markets and rec markets across the country. You don't know which jar I'm going to get. I'm probably going to get all of them that I can. And that's what I'm going to judge, what you put out there to the average consumer. Because I've seen too many brands win a cup and then I go see their shit in a shop and I'm like, wow, okay,
Yeah, but
I see you. Now, that being said, I love all hash.
But look,
All hash.
when you take your wife out to dinner,
she
gets all dressed up. Like,
but today's shit's all fucked, right? Like, today's shit's all fucked because I understand that a lot of the batch sizes and testing, to do testings, like, bro, it just doesn't make sense to like get a small batch tested in a certain way. And so blends, thank God for blends. Like, honestly,
we also have
homies deciding to do that because I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm more of a purist on like what I choose to collect that goes in my fridge will probably be more like single strain, like source in the jar.
Yeah.
But I have plenty of blends that I'm smoking these days, but I still love smoking just raw bubble from one strain.
I think there needs to be competitions where you're just taking product off the shelves, but I also think that we need to somehow delineate between competitions that are for everyday consumers to look to for advice and competitions that are strictly for the culture. Like the stuff that wins legends,
bring your best.
You probably aren't going to be able to get.
Best.
You know what I mean? And so I think that we need to, like, a lot of people are like, oh,
you had to be there.
Yeah, you guys are You guys are holding this competition to determine the best, so that that person can, you can go out and all the retailers can then go, well, that person only has so much of that, and then
it's up to the maker to reproduce that and put it out to the public after that. That's the marketing that comes with. Like for Legends, like we encourage everyone that comes to Legends, every maker that enters, dude, make sure that you're going to put out your Legends entry after the event and market that. And fucking, it's about marketing too. It's about that's how you fucking pay the bills. That's how you get to have the security and the safety that you need, the financial security and safety that you need to do all these other fucking things. Like
it's like a total touchy subject because you're like, I don't want to upset anyone. Like literally, that's like the first thing I should have said is I don't want to upset anyone because I know I probably did. But it's about like the cups and all of that. It's like it's like there's an asterisk almost with all of them, and that's fair. And that's kind of like we should all know what the asterisk,
it's a cup entry.
Yeah.
What about that though? What about the fact that everything being entered is a cup entry? It's like
for sure
you're not going to just it's
okay. So
I think there's room for what you're talking about. What you're talking about is standard quality control.
Yeah,
it's like a quality control cup.
You didn't pull it down 2 weeks early for color because you wanted to win the cup.
Yeah, and just pull. But here's the thing about quality control cups: the quality control cup could be affected by the dispensary that holds the product because they improperly stored it. All these different things are going to affect that. That's why a cup entry. I know you're bringing your best. Like I was using the analogy earlier. When you take your wife out to a special dinner. She's going to get dressed up. She's going to want to look real nice, and there's no shame in that. And that's what the cup's about is like bring your best, and then after the cup, here's the next challenge. If you're a great company and you're a good businessman and you know your shit, Now
You
you're
better
going to
put
get
that
that product
product
out
out
to the
there, yeah.
public. Exactly. Now you're going to create them. You're going to use that cup win as your marketing to put that product out. And maybe that product's
That
the one
part.
that you're on the map for.
That part
You know
right
what I-
there. I think that's
know?
the part that triggers me is like the use that cup win. Like,
You better.
use that cup win. Because I've been involved in several cup wins. And I've watched people use those cup wins. I've watched them maybe squander some of those cup wins. And it's sometimes no fault of your own.
Wasted talent.
Hey, there's nothing in the world worse than wasted talent. And, you know, it is that kind of an energy where you're like, all right, I put your best foot forward. Show me the best shit you got for this cup. You know, I always want to see that. But I think there was a period where it became this like cutting down early, doing these things. And I'm like, you're doing things that are so out of the ordinary. And the blends, the only concern that I have is longevity, is that it's a corner cut towards what some of the old elder breeders spent years trying to do, which was blend resins naturally. And find when you did a blend like that, you were trying to see what is the flavor profile maybe like that I'm going to hunt out in the pheno when I cross these two strains. Because for me, a lot of times I was taught through breeders, washing hash was like a way to take and not waste some of that material that got seeded or whatnot. And there was some things you could do to still get some of the trikes to taste that seeded kind of run, to see maybe what kind of phenos you were going to hunt for, you know? And that,
I mean, some people would say that seeded runs were more terpy, like they'd have a higher level of terpenes in them sometimes.
Yeah.
That was,
and
I remember people kind of spitting that.
So I think we've gotten away. Hey, listen, education is the only way you kind of change these kind of things, is more kids kind of seeing and hearing like this is what the old days used to be like. I know there's some cats out there now that are doing blends in the hash world that are starting to do breeding, and fucking kudos to them, because that's where I hope the train takes you. The concern is that the train stops and you think that that's the station. You blended resins and now you're there. You can just grow GMO and blend it with this. And it's like, bro, why don't you cross it with 3 other hash strains and see where that takes you? That's where other guys used to go. So I think that there's still a certain, you know, energy around that, which is beautiful. I think it's coming back more, especially now with seeds being legal. Like, you might see me drop seeds soon, you know? I used to make seeds back in the day. I got some crosses I want to drop. Now everybody's fucking dropping seeds. People are selling seeds. It's legal now. So, like, there's some shit out there where you realize, like, this culture is just taking more steps. I try to always be, like, you know, positive with a filter on, like, where it's going. You know, if I don't like it, I try to figure it out and then decide if I don't like it. Because I don't understand it doesn't mean I can dislike it. I need to understand it first, you know. And
when I think of all that,
they like the blends, and I think that they'll eventually get to breeding. I hope.
If it leads them there, but I think what I get from all that is, like, you had me with hash. Like, it's hash.
Sure, for sure.
That's what I like. I like the fact that it's hash.
Notice my little spiel I ended before with, like, I love all hash.
You had me with hash, man. You had me at hash. Like, that's it right there. Because it's, I feel like maybe I'm just more of a whore, but I'm more happy of the fact that they made hash, that they're making hash, and they're like, you know what, I like these two, and I put them together. Oh, you're being creative. Oh, and they go well together. Oh, even fucking better. Whether they can reproduce it or not, like, I don't know if they have a notepad where they live and they fucking use it, but the other part of it is, like you said, do they market it correctly? Because that's the other thing too, is like, or do they just copy the other guy's label and copy what the other guy that's selling the most is doing? I mean, there's nothing I love more than when you see something fucking new and you're like, oh, fuck, look at this little fucking fish that went against the whole entire fucking bunch of fish here and look at what we have. We have this brand new fucking thing. And that's like, and I love that too. But at the same time, as long as the hash is good, I don't give a fuck.
For sure. I mean, I think, you know, I think that's, you know, the crucial end all be all. Like, we don't have to maybe even like the strain or whatever, but when the shit's fire, like we all know, you know,
or put a little bit of this with a little bit of that, and you're like, whoa, look at that. What is that? Oh, that's a blend. And then at that point, if you dab something that someone made was a blend and you like it, what do you do then? You know, you like it. You're just like, well, fucking, you got me.
and this is, hey man, shout out to anybody who's really putting out blends and they're making them taste, really spot on each time, because it's going to be different. You might need a 60-40 split on this one or a 70-30 on the next one. It's going to be different. And like, shout out the homies who have like a good enough connection with their plants to say like this round is this going into the wash.
Gonna need a little more. Yeah.
Like that's where it happens. And shout out to that. There's not many. I'll be real with you. There's not many that are doing it great, because there's so many names on jars that I see, and I'm like, that is nowhere near what it was the last time. Like not even close. But then there's a few where I'm like, it's a blend. Like that.
But you're
jar
talking
is a blend,
about, you're referring to the companies that I would refer to as the well marketed companies.
And traditional brands that are out there.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
they're
like
well
some of the bigger
marketed. They're
guys, for
traditional,
sure.
but they're well marketed brands, and they you never know. But what I like about it is I never know quite what I'm going to get, but it's
okay.
It's in the direction.
For
it's
sure.
in that direction, and I'm like, it's not too bad. Like I take my hat off to that too. Like it's I'm definitely like, if it's good, we're there. That's all for me. I'm like, oh, this is good. Okay, like I don't care what someone else thinks. Someone else could be like, oh, Addy, that shit's all dark. That shit's this. Dude, you could line up 20 of my friends right now that will have a story about how my favorite hash was the ugliest, crappiest fucking hash. And that's just what it is. It's like, it's what you like. That's what I love. Like, some people have impeccable taste and everything they like is fire. And then there's me, and fucking I'm gonna like something, maybe this or that. But hey, it hasn't stopped people from giving me fire ass hash and me getting to try different shit. So that's
I think I'm down to try everything. And I think
Always.
that I'm a fan of most things. It's funny. People are like, well, you work for Dying Breed. Does that mean like you work for Third Gen? Do you only like Skittles, or do you hate Skittles? And I love all of the ones that made us double take. They have a high place in my heart. The ones that I've
smelling it.
The ones that I've lived through, like those strains, you're like, your friend came to you and was like, you have to fucking try this shit. You got to track down this weirdo dude, Jigga 415, and try this strain cookies. Like, it's just different. Like, there's an energy with goosebumps that you can see forming on someone's skin when they're telling you about a strain. I think a little bit of that is lost in some of the blends. That's all. Like, it's not a diss. It's really like that energy of like, yo, have you seen Turtle Tree's new batch of OG Pie Breath? What the fuck? And when you see that, you're like, okay, that means that the last 10 rounds of that shit were different. And he's telling me this is the best one he's had of this. There's a certain energy around that. Like someone telling you about a certain strain of hash that you need to go to like a certain place, like Portland, Oregon, and get some fucking rose water. Or go there, get some dog shit cherry pie. Like, you got to call one of these 3 people. Like, there's something about that still exists. But I don't hear people talking about blends like that. Rarely. They do. But it's more like, it's still even rare people telling me about like the new strains that I haven't heard about and I need to go fucking chase down. But that shit definitely happens, So I just like that energy. So anything that can create that energy. So I what you're saying, I'll take into consideration a little bit more of when there's the guys who can keep recreating that close enough to that like spirit. Yeah, that's some fucking shit. And there are a few of them for sure.
That experience. Yeah. Dude,
Yes.
I tried a Banana OG Moonbow blend that was fucking fire. And then I tried a Moonbow Mochi blend and I was like, this is fire. Like, this
fucking
is
Fletcher. Shout out.
This is amazing work right here. And they're just blends. They're taking some Moonbow that's probably not like the pheno, but it's Moonbow. And then they're like, all right, well, I got this banana fucking OG that's pretty fire. And here we go, or, some pretty strong different things. And I like that sort of like, that's different.
Hash.
Like, there's something about that's different that I kind of
we all do it. We all did it too. Like when you'd have like a little leftover on the dabber and you hit something else. And you're like, now I'm going to intentionally double scoop,
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
Where do you sit with the...
But Jameson, I am more of a purist.
Yeah.
You are a purist. I know now.
what about hash versus rosin? Like, where do you sit there? You know, if in a perfect world, would you
Sundays
be
only or what?
loose heads, or would you be smoking rosin, or what?
I mean, bro, like literally right now, the jar that I'm smoking is like raw heads from turtle trees, OG pie breath. That's why it was on the tip of my tongue, and it's just been in this jar caked up, and I fucking love it. And it's like
Greasy.
when the bubble is really fucking well done and the heads are perfect, it like rosins itself in the jar, you know? So I love it all. I really got into pressing. You know, I really got into pressing because pressing was a way to like manipulate out the terpene profile that you loved, like mechanically. And there was something like sexually attractive to me about that, you know? Like I was just like, wow, I just took this bubble hash that had this one terp profile and I like pulled a little bit more of this one out when I pressed it a little bit colder or pressed it a little hotter and got this more texture. Yeah, man, I think there's a few homies out there that have like some press skills that are like unmatched. Bear Bear's one of like the OGs in this shit, in my opinion. Professor Sift, those guys make me love rosin more than hash in a way because of that. Because when I taste some of the shit that they'll press and the flavor profiles they'll get from some of the heads they're pressing, yeah, man, versus like the raw, I don't know. I think I'm like rosin on a daily basis, but I love having a fat jar of hash always. Like I need it, you know? Like I scramble to get like another jar of full melt if I'm like running low on one. Yeah. And I'll have like ounces of like rosin in the fridge, you know?
Yeah. So then let me ask you this. If you had to make a sweeping generalization, would you prefer your melt to be air dried or put through a freeze dryer?
Oh man, that's some fun shit. You know, air dry did something to the terps by like, I feel like decaying them a little bit and maybe getting them out a little bit more. Like essentially air dried is almost like a cold cured process. You're like breaking it down because you're letting the oxygen, you know, do its work. And so man, shit. But freeze dried is just like that pure like terp, you know? I mean, I think a generalization is hard, but I love the freeze dryer, man. I really don't ever want to go back to a time before it.
We all know it's strain specific, and like we all know that it. But in your experience, would you say that you prefer or more cultivars are better through the freeze dryer, or more cultivars are better through air drying? Just in your experience.
I think in my experience when I was washing, it was like there was a chance if you didn't run your freeze dryer right that you could, you know, suck out some of those volatile terps in your process. Now, when you air dried, they broke down. And so it was like a different kind of profile in that sense. I always left out some to air dry. That was like a thing for me. When I had like my brother-in-law working for me and doing shit. Now he does shipping for my Wookerson Studios drops, but he used to help me in the hash lab, and I would always have him, like we would do like dry stuff, like air dry stuff, as well as like running shit through the freeze dryer, you know. And it was because some strains definitely came out better air dried, you know. And in a sense, I was pressing all of it at that time, so no one at the end knew like what I was doing, but there were jars that I did straight from, you know, freeze dryer that some strains, like the gassier strains, did better on the air dry. I don't know why. That was just my experience. I was doing a lot of Chem Dogs and Chem Sis and, you know, Gorilla Glues, and I would do big cold room. It was in a nice cold room that I would air dry, but I would prefer the air dry. I would burn my forearms up fucking microplaning all day, but I would prefer some of the fucking more gassy strains in the air dry cold room. You know, but like I said, I would always run it in both. When I would get a new strain back then, I would always run some in the freeze dryer. You know, I remember having like 3 harvest rights, and there would only be one that would ever be working. Fucking A, you know? I think it's still like that for a lot of homies.
Yeah, I don't think it's gotten any better, that's for sure. What?
Well, dude, they're like the Mormons. They had no fucking clue what was gonna happen. It's like a Mormon company that started making this shit for end of day times so that everybody could freeze dry their fruit and stuff and have a whole fridge full of like the 28 days after the world ends to eat food and like whatever. I'm not trying to diss any Mormons right now, but like they had no clue that all the hash heads are about to like run up the numbers on their company.
Yeah, it's not a good.
Like they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, don't tell them what you're using it for. If you move it forward. I learned that the hard way. I had to hang up.
Dude, once again, Utah involved in again. Like I'm telling you right now.
Once again.
I'm not saying nothing, but Utah once again with his hands in there. Okay.
I love it.
My next question is: did you see Soil Grown Phil his video, and is that what sparked your journey on rosin, or did somebody else show you, or how'd you hear about it?
Icy Mag and my buddy Lot Legend Lenny, Crystal Farms Collective. He grows some fire ass weed. We like stumbled upon it in the Icy Mag chats, and like I knew Nick as a DJ in SF, Nick T. You know, like he was a reggae DJ in San Francisco, and like we didn't know each other at the time, you know? But like I followed these guys' handles on Icy Mag. And I remember like reading some of the forums and some of the back and forths about microplaning. And my other buddy, this other homie, Manny Fresh, out in Colorado, was another one that was pressing on Fish Lot. And it was like hair straighteners. And it was pretty much like, yo, do you have any old bubble? Because they all knew me as a dude who used to make hella bubble. With my homie Brandon, we used to sell a lot of bubble. Fucking Brandon now runs Leafa in Colorado. Shout out Brandon and Cheeks. But Brandon and I were like doing hella bubble, like just bubble that was like you could dab it, you know, in like big full outdoor trim runs where we were telling kids to freeze the trim, just in the early stages of getting material. And it was like me and Lenny pressing some brown, like old bubble from my freezer. And it came out golden yellow. And we were like, all right, we're into this now. This is it. Like, we're making bubble, and we're going to make fresh bubble now and do this with it. And at that time, I was really close friends with Niz, Nectar's Collective, E Ward, all those guys. Like, Holy Water was the thing. That was the top shelf thing at the time. And so, but all those guys had material. And there was access to material if I wanted to go buy a pound or two. Nobody had a problem with that, you know? Go fuck around and see what happened. And I started fucking around and saw what happened. And I was like hooked, you know? And then I started running into Bear Rosin and Professor Sift at cups, at Sessions and High Times cups with like the flower rosin. Fucking Professor Sift with the strawberry banana DNA, straw nana, flower rosin. And the shit was fire. I remember that shit. We were like, so you can just press flour? And then it was like, but what if we press like fresh full melt? And at that time, kids were like, I remember Quave and Norm being like, yeah, we press our 6-star. And I'm like, what? Because there was always kids still making 6-star. You know, like that was like a thing. But no one had really like commercially started pressing hella fucking rosin, you know? And I think it was like the last chalice. God, I don't remember what year that was. The last chalice. I even have like a beach ball in my studio from that last chalice. But that last chalice, I showed up with, it was Beazle 1. It was a Beazle 1 cross that I did. I was like involved with that strain back in the day. It's a strain that Skelly and those guys still run. The Beazle 1. It's a Great White Shark Super Silver Haze Diesel cross from back in the day. But I ran that shit and it came out tasting like cranberry, like Thanksgiving dinner. And so we called it Thanksgiving dinner. That was the hash that pretty much got me hired by like Brandon and Shiloh. Like me making that hash, like getting, like it progressed all the way to that point, but it was like basically me and my buddy Lenny on like weird chat rooms. Someone telling us, press the fucking hash that you have in your freezer. And like just randomly, I can't even remember what year it was. We're going back, you know, like 6-7 years. You know what I mean? Because we pressed it for a couple years before I ever turned in to try to like put it into a jar, you know?
So were you pressing it and then immediately smoking it?
Pressing it and immediately smoking it, yes. And then a buddy of mine had a t-shirt press, like a heat transfer. And I was one of the ones that was like, bro, we got to go take it to homie's machine. He has a couple, he'll let me ruin one. Because I knew we were going to ruin it, you know? I knew. Like I wasn't going to lie to him. I was going to be like, we're going to ruin this machine. Tell me which one we can ruin. And so he let us ruin a machine. And then I ended up fucking ordering one. I think at the time you could only get one at that time from like Rosin Tech. It was like a small little upstart at the time. But that was a couple years after we had been pressing it with hair straighteners and the clamps from Home Depot. You know? Yeah, fucking A. We weren't cold curing it back then. We were not cold curing it back then.
And so where do you sit on the popularity and rise in popularity of fresh press? Like, is that something that you're a fan of, or where's your preference lie?
I love fresh press if they do it right. If they actually let the hash come to temperature and they don't have too many fucking water bubbles in it, you know? I think fresh press is probably the purest form of rosin, you know? It's like the shit right off. We used to call it the raw because it would be like what came right out of the bags. You'd have to scrape off the bag with your tool, and whatever was left on the tool after collection, you would fucking take a massive dab of. And like that gave me the first idea how good that hash was, you know? Cold cure, like I said, man, cold cure definitely brings out the terps. You know, it's definitely become more of the standard shelf life operation. But there is a certain thing about when it was air dried and pressed, it came out differently. It was almost like those terps were already kind of opened up a little by the air drying oxidation breakdown, you know? So we smoked a lot of it like right off the bat and didn't do any manipulation with it. It wasn't until I started leaving my shit in the refrigerator and Professor Sif starts hitting me up being like, bro, you got to leave it in the fridge for this long and stir it. Or you had the homies that were heating it and creating all the fucking different combinations of like textures and getting shit to crash out. What was the fucking, you know, they went to Jared's, was making crazy shit at the time. You know, that's fast forwarding it from where we're at. But like kids started doing like the heat tech, you know, and like combining kind of BHO techniques, right? Like just experimenting, like, hey, making this and using the fucking oven worked for the heads in this fucking fashion. Let's see if it works in this one, you know?
For a while, it was chasing. We were really chasing BHOs.
Yeah, I honestly, bro, those are some of the most fun times in hash. In the past, like 5 to 10 years, that little era was really fun. You know, diamonds were still a thing. People were like, I don't want to say not giving up because no one's giving up. It's just things shift, you know? But like diamonds were still really like a chase, you know? People were still really pushing on that. And then rosin was like this thing, and I feel like Soil Grown and a couple of these cats were really trying to kind of assimilate into the other hash, you know, playrooms, if you will. You know, like, hey, it can go here too. You know, it's resins. We're just manipulating resin. Like, and I think what it did the best for was getting rosin accepted for what it was, not for what it could be and what it could be manipulated to be, but getting rosin like accepted as a like, oh, this shit's legit. It's staying, you know. Mechanical separation, water and ice. This is the thing, you know. And I think the terpenes are different. You know, you pull different stuff out with a carbon kind of based separation. So, you know, I think in the end, I think we'll all appreciate all hash, like in a different way than we have throughout the eras of each one that's popular. Like right now, you show up with diamonds and someone's looking at you funny. But I think fast forward a few years, they won't. They might ask you what strain it is, you know? I just think like we got ahead of ourselves with trying to find like the one process. And now we're starting to like realize, oh, everything has a place, you know?
Yeah.
Like we need to make a lot of cartridges. Okay, that's not going to be easy with this one, but maybe with that one. And, you know, and we can even work on that. And this strain's better than that strain. I think we're learning so much day to day because we're not in the shadows anymore, man. You know, like there's fucking people that are not from our culture that are doing the work for our culture right now, you know, lab scientists, kids out of college, like all these kids that would have had to do something else before they got into being able to work with this stuff are able to just make it a career, like from fucking 15 years old. You could have your kid at 15 could be like, I want to be this. And then at 25, be leading hash maker in the industry. That's awesome. That's a fucking beautiful pathway that like was not there the way it is now back then. You know, kid could get a job working for Jungle Boys. all of a sudden fucking has a meeting with Skelly and fucking Greg, and they're like, this motherfucker's a star. And then all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? I'm just like making stories up here, but like that story exists now. Fuck, you know? Look at Skelly. He exists. You know what I mean? And that's a beautiful thing to see, like someone like that existing in this kind of culture. Like, you know, okay, you like went through those. Now someone else doesn't have to do what you had to do, you know, to prove that they belong. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Yeah. So I think like all of the forms of hash are really going to be at some point, you know, like all there, and they all kind of gave way for each of themselves to exist more, you know?
Skelly has the coolest job in the cannabis industry.
You're not going to have much argument from many people on that. I don't think.
He's earned it. I mean, he's Skelly. I don't know if anyone else would do it that way.
Yeah, I would like to see like more homies get, you know, that shot. There's nothing like I'm not saying that I want to see like someone besides him. No, I didn't want to phrase it like that. I would like to see that because of the hymns being successful, that there's more cats giving that shot.
Yeah,
that there's more of him, you know,
yeah.
and that becomes like a commonplace. Like the way I look at Virgil getting where he got, and now Heron Preston and some of these other cats getting more of a shot than they normally would have because, it's a proven concept. Okay, now business people can kind of accept the concept and put a kind of like a, you know, precedent to an idea, you know?
Trust it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
for the people who are listening who don't know who Skelly is and what his job is. Can you guys enlighten our listeners?
God, what would you even say?
What's his title?
Is he creative director at 710? Is he
probably creative director?
I mean, that's how I view him. I view him as like what Virgil was for Louis, like that guy is for 710. You know,
he's like creative director, head of business development, kind of like in that space. But his job is to help. Help bring new genetics in and then figure out the process of what phenos are going to be selected and then, you know, work
He's
as
basically a cultural attaché.
Mm-hmm. But I think he also works in the company with all of the other components too. So he's like, you know, he's there on that cultural side, making sure and approving different things, I think, that are going out to the public.
Yeah, making
art
sure
direction, a bunch of different stuff. But then Brad's there too, so I think it's. But I think he's like the director of art, or I don't even know what the fuck his title is. I'm not sure.
I just think that what he does for that brand is like the kind of shit I try to do for Emerald Cup. You know, it's like the stuff he does is like try to keep the mainstays of culture alive whilst transitioning to like this new place, this kind of corporate structured world that the bosses and the powers that be above us and like alongside of us creating, you know, literature that goes into like, you know, legal law. All of those kind of cats need to see a certain resemblance of like the other worlds that they're used to. And some of us have tried to jump in and be like, well, it's going to go this way, whether we like it or not. So let us be some of the ones that can kind of like sprinkle the seasonings and keep putting the filters up. Like this shit's whack. This should not make it through. Mm-hmm. And I think he does.
By no means are we doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's because I don't know all the inner workings of what's going on in that company. And he and I are not like by any means good friends, but there's a certain respect amongst people that you see that are creatives within an industry and what they're able to accomplish. It doesn't matter if you're like, would even get along with that person. It doesn't matter. Like if there's certain things about it, you're like, oh, there's a service. This motherfucker's tapped into a certain wavelength that needs to be handled. And if it's not him, it's going to be somebody else. And I'm afraid to think what someone else would do with these powers. You know what I mean? Yeah. So to speak. And so
he helps curate the culture at 710. So he's essentially like the cultural director, artistic director. And I mean, that's what I he's like Brad's right hand too, like that owns the company. So he's.
And I hope that there's other owners of brands and other, you know, Brads of this world that will like see, you know, the business might not have all the money that it will have in the end at the beginning, but these kind of people are integral into making sure that it gets there. And
these things are important.
And you've got to focus
on these things. You
got to find a way for that person to eat, live, and be until that comes. And sometimes cats aren't willing to sacrifice, you know, what's theirs or what could be to like help this person help them, so to speak. But like you want to see more Brads doing that, where, like I said, man, some of these cats I don't even see completely eye to eye on all these guys in this industry, but that has never mattered to me. It's kind of like, oh, what's your kind of like, what's your vibe? You're trying to do this, okay, that's good. It's going to push this place further on. You know, it's going to push this whole industry. 710's got kids smoking hash more than a lot of brands. You know, other people like, you know, all of the equipment companies, whether it's Carta that you guys are friends with, whether it's Puffco, whether it's any of these guys that are putting out products that are making people smoke more hash, whether it's QCB consistently making new bangers since they started, Task consistently making new bangers, Toro consistently making new pieces, new bangers, everything that's in there. And you look at all these cats and you're like, all right, I have a high level of respect for what you're doing to push this industry forward and not lose the culture, like not lose certain elements of this. You know what I mean? And as much as like cartoon characters as all of us can become as we get success with all this shit, you still push as hard as you can for those cats whose sentiment is still the same. You know, smoke more hash.
When you run a company and you're building a business and that business is servicing an industry, you know, or a market, when you're running that company, as it grows to a certain size, in order for the company to be successful, you have to make sure there's not a lot of waste. You have to make sure that you're being efficient. You have to make sure all these things are in play and that money's being spent correctly. And when that type of mentality, which is necessary for success, meets up against culture, typically there needs to be somebody there who's like, oh, put the fucking brakes on. We're not going to compromise on X, Y, and Z. And I look at Skelly as a guy who that's his job, is to be like, put on the brakes. Here's where the culture is.
Yeah.
And what I love about Brad is that Brad's showing everyone that, hey, look, there are certain things that are important. And when you're running a company, for example, running a company, you got everything going on. And if you're smoking hash and you're a hash guy, you may have ideas about what would be great merch to put out for the company. But then your numbers guy is like, well, no, we need to put money into here. Like, what do you mean, making trinkets for hash junkies? Like, the fuck are you talking about? We gotta. There needs to be a guy there that says trinkets for hash junkies are very important. Okay.
Yes.
And we're gonna fucking make them. And then because that's the culture and and I think hash junkie is a funny ass word, but then the hash culture is gonna say in return, fuck yeah, that they recognize that. They're like, oh, they probably lost money on this one, but how fucking great is it that there's a freezer sitting on my fucking table right here that can hold 8 grams of hash? Like, you know, there's like certain things.
You know, there's something, like I said, man, it's like 710 has got like the ability to kind of look into like the world of merch and skateboarding and all of the surf kind of brands, and being, you know, really anchored in Southern California now. I think, you know, it's important to see brands that are kind of, like I said, man, they're becoming the next skate brands, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be them considered the next Supreme or whatever, if you want to like make the comparisons like that, you know, it'll be like the brand that got kids into hash, and, you know, there's some real powerful shit there, and it makes kind of an umbrella, you know, shadow against the horrible corporate rains that want to wash away all the culture. It puts an umbrella up and keeps like some of those cats like safe enough to be like, hey, you might want to give me another chance to exist, because maybe there's more money to be made off of me being involved than like shutting me out and putting a bunch of whack brands out here kids aren't going to buy. They're going to keep going to the traditional market and hit their friends up and support those guys. But if you keep seeing more brands like create that space, you know, it's like, I look at brands like Frosty Hash, I look at brands like Calia, and they're like the more mom and pop shops that are like pushing to be a part of like the bigger, you know, corporate organized culture, and still winning cups and still like heavily invested in the culture and still at all the events. And, you know, like Calia washing the fucking hardcore OG that they brought to the last Legends. Like, fucking A, shout out JP and Jared for that one. That's, you know, Jay Cure is showing up with the
people don't even know what happened.
In rosin
people don't
form.
Even know.
Even Roger, who wants to like not like anything, was like, oh, I want a jar. Is this jar for me? And like, just that whole vibe around those kind of younger, you know, brands. When I say younger, it's not about the age of the people involved. Like those brands have only been, you know, kind of on that legal side, whereas 710 had to jumpstart with Colorado. And as we all know, like Colorado's law has definitely made it a little bit better for some brands to find their footing before having to jump out, whereas California forced them like sink or swim, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing that change now. You're seeing brands that are being asked to come to market. You saw Bobby with fucking Trilogy get into the shelf. You see a lot of these cats, and like it doesn't matter what you think about like their brands. Like there's a certain kind of pathway from traditional to the shelf that's being honored with these guys getting that success. And you know, like I'll speak on it, man. Like there's some of these cats that I would love to really see get a chance, and I think they will, given time, because of the success of some of these other situations. You know, so it's important, you know, and like I feel like because of, it's funny, we're not trying to give this guy all this credit, but like because of Skelly existing in that world, it leaves it open for an Alien Labs Teddy to like take Alien Labs to the next level and be creative director of Connected, you know, and like that brand is doing well on so many levels because of him, you know, and you know the Count is the man. Don't get me wrong. This takes no like respect away from that guy and all of the work that like that crew did to build Connected. But Teddy really is at this point like really tapped in severely into like cultures that he probably couldn't even get himself tapped out of if he wanted to, you know, whether it's like he's real into video games and he's into all these things that, bro, it's tapped into the youth culture that is coming in the next 10 years without even trying to be. Just by being a part of his culture of the now, he's like educating and bringing kids in. And like I said, man, I want to see more of those two guys exist, you know, like I want to see like other homies like me, like I said, get that shot. Those street kids get the shot when they're a little older and a little bit more refined, not so rough around the edges and don't curse at every board meeting. Like, yeah, I made some mistakes, but like I did my job the best I could. And I did it with the mindset of, I hope there's another kid like me that gets one after, you know, I hope I see at some point 10 of me, you know, in a room, you know, that would make me happy.
Yeah. It's happening too. I mean, it has to have an opportunity to happen, and I think it's starting to. You're starting to see the Skellies and the Teddys, and you know, you're seeing these people that are like, you know, CMAs, and there's people that are successful.
Proof of concept, bro. Proof of concept. Invest into that motherfucker, and your company will like bear fruit. You know.
Yep. No, and there's a lot of those kids. That's what I love the most. Is like that when you look around, your friends are successful. And they actually like have money to do stuff, you know, like they're doing stuff and you're seeing them do well. And you're like, fuck. And, you know, like nothing makes me more happy than seeing like Bobby Trill do well. There's something about that I'm just fuck yeah, dude. Like it's just like Bobby wins, everyone wins. You know
if you're one of the
like,
brands,
fuck yeah. Like
if you're one of the brands that's like not so into Bobby Trill and some of the other homies, then it should inspire you that like, you can get there. Like they were pushed aside by some of the other bigger powers, and
But then look at Bobby Bobby's putting on Waterboys, and Bobby's putting on, you know, and Taylor and Bobby are coming together.
You know,
West Coast. It's like you're seeing all this shit.
Proper shout out to the hash hole and the donut and whatnot. But when we all went to Spain, the homie who was showing us how to roll them was Lorenzo at Terps Army. You know. One of my favorite cities outside of San Francisco and New York is Barcelona. David at HQ, Lorenzo at Terps Army, like they're my brothers. They became brothers since my first trip out there. But Lorenzo's the one who like showed me how to roll those, and the whole time he was like, Bobby Trill showed me, you know. And so like, there's a certain aspect of that, you know, culture that's blossomed and grown. You have to see the Bobby Trills make it. I don't care if you don't like him, man. He's supposed to make it, you know. And like
he doesn't care if you don't like him. That's the best part about him.
Of course, no,
he doesn't give a fuck.
No, and that's beautiful too. But like, you know, I guess like the point is like all of these cats, they're being shown. You know, there is a way. You know, and the bosses are being shown like this is a way. You know, this is a viable path. You know, I feel like if I got my job for Emerald Cup now, they'd probably listen to me 10 times harder than they did before, and I'd be able to do so much more. And I hope they find somebody to listen to, like I was yapping at those meetings about shit, pushing them to put Bob Snodgrass in there, give him a free booth. That changed the whole outlook of that whole event. You know, that brought like the dead culture that fed that whole thing to life within that whole system. And I feel like, yeah, man, like the Skellys and the Teddies and some of these guys that are, you know, doing the work with these brands to bring them to the shelf and bring them to life. It's
JP
like,
at West Coast Cure.
Yep. You know,
Another one.
it's happening. You know, it's happening for these guys. And I'm proud to be a part of this shit, even though for me, maybe cats don't realize how tapped in and how like into like the weed part I was and still am maybe. But it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just pushing this culture the best I can, taking the things that I know how to do and, you know, putting them to good use, and then teaching all the cats around me how to make merch, how to merchandise themselves. Like, I got free game coming out every orifice whenever you're around me. Like, I'll spit it to anybody. You ask Shant and all the brothers, you know, with Cookies Maywood and all those cats, like, I'll just keep talking and spit it out if I think you're going to benefit from it. You know what I'm saying? I want to see more me's out here doing that, whether it's through Skelly posting and showing you the kind of art and the direction that like is fun for you to go with your stuff, whether it's Sacred Fruits showing you like some of the kind of education around like psychedelics and microdosing, whether it's any of these brands that are pushing out education on any kind of level, you know, like that to me is like the hype, you know, that's like where we're winning, you know.
100%. What like what's next? What are you focused on for this coming year? I think you and Addison might have something in the works, but you know, what's next for Lot Comedy? Like, what are you focused on?
I want to bring my whole entire life that I've lived to this point really to be like the engine and the platform that not just myself and my art and career is able to blossom from, but like other of my homies. Whenever I have thrown shows, I've always invited friends to come and do collabs with me or just show up and drop shit. It's basically like I've created little mini lots everywhere I've gone, you know? And in the last show we did in Chicago during a Dead show, during Dead Tour, you know, we had a show with C-Maz at the Maid spot. And then I took the cats to a fucking a private booth at Wrigley Field. And we had a crazy sesh and like blew out Wrigley like I've never smoked weed in a venue before. And I want to do more of that. I want to go on tour. I want to put a couple books out that I have. I had a volume of Listen to the Plants that I put out, and I haven't put out one in a couple years. I got a couple more of those coming soon. I want to interview more cats from the scene and ask them, you know, simple questions about like what the plants have done for them and focus on more of that culture and really put that as like a traveling fucking circus, if you will, and like put that shit on tour and get some sponsors to pay for a tour bus and put some homies like me and Pyroscopic and a couple of these guys on a bus and like let us do our thing, you know, and let us like show you what this whole life is, because I feel like my life in the past is the reason why everybody buys my art now. Is kind of like I want to show some of these kids that that's what it is. Be true to yourself. You know, a career will show itself. If you want to be in this scene, a career will come to you. You know, be true to yourself. Try to create some shit that's not being created. Try not to rip off anybody else, but like putting that into like a tour, bringing that across the world, shows. I want to do like art shows in Spain for next Spanibus. I want to have the kind of connection between hash and all these cultures be, you know, so visible through art. You know, that's like my thing, is like trying to show you that, oh, you think art connects people? Well, I'm doing hash art. It connects people even more. You know, it's like it really is relevant to everything everybody's going through. And I just want to do more shit like that. I want to put more people on. I want to see more artists. I want to see more cats quit careers and take this shit up as a career. I want to see more kids quit jobs and go into the fucking cannabis community because the jobs are there again and it's good and it makes sense. I want to see more cats grow up looking at guys like Skelly and Teddy and be like, I can be that. Look at me and be like, I can be an artist and just make myself an artist. Look at Slinger. You know, I want to see that. That's that. For me, like, this is never ending. I got kids now and they feed off this art. And my daughter paints with me in my room. And so I'm breaking chains from my life and all these kids' lives. And I feel like that's what's next for me. More of the same. Building this culture out to like be able to have it as a platform to share it with as many people as I can.
That's awesome, man. And I think it's needed. Like, I think, you know, the art you bring forward is really unique and it garners a lot of attention. But like, I mean, I think that there's so much space for more hash art. in this community for more dead art, for more of these melding community crossing, you know. I applaud it, and it's really cool to see and really cool to be a part of. So I'm super excited and super stoked about you know, hearing that you plan to, you know, not only do more but help turn others on and get others doing more. I think that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I think that's what I was taught. You know, I was turned on by other artists. You know, that's what I want to do. It's like I owe you know.
Is it public, the legend stuff, Addy, or not yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right.
We, I mean, I think we can talk about that. You know,
I got some plans. We're gonna put some art up. You know, there's gonna be some merch.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's public that that Wookerson's involved. So
Beautiful.
yeah, and we can announce it that Wookerson is.
I didn't mean to let the cat out of the bag,
art.
but I mean
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. You know, you're bringing Wookerson in to do the art for legends. I mean, that's fucking phenomenal. I think, you know,
I'm gonna
go ahead.
I'll give you guys a little sneak peek of some of the stuff that I have that I want planned. That's gonna be there is just a visual representation of like some of the things and sentiments throughout our culture and some of the figureheads, you know, that we've lost and some of the people that matter to us. You know, I want to put rest in peace Arhole. He's going to be represented there. That guy was a big part of like the artist and hash culture that is with all of us today, whether it's Jeezy or me or Trevi or any of these guys you're supporting. You know, we're all friends, man. Like we all know each other, and it all still comes from that lot kind of culture. And Arhole was a big one on, you know, pushing everybody to like understand that, you know, and I want to kind of further that down. Frenchie, rest in peace, man. We're going to have Frenchie's birthday is like right before Legends or something like that. So I want to have a little bit of Frenchie up there. You know, part of me was like the guy that, like I said, when I was talking to Banjo, I respect everybody's kind of place in the culture, even if I didn't see eye to eye with them, you know? Mm-hmm. And me and Frenchie butted heads about shit nonstop. The brown hash and the gold hash and the cut early and all this shit. But the dude was my big brother and like an uncle to a lot of us, and he never fucking cared where we came from or what fucking dirty shit we were doing back in the States or whatever when he ran into us. And so there's like a lot of like things with legends. I think that the name says it all, you know. There's like, and I'm going to talk to Addison and Kevin about this too. Like we want to represent our legends, you know. There's a part of like building the new legend that dinner, but also representing that this stems from a culture, you know. Marcus and a lot of these guys put a lot of work in, you know. Fucking Skunk Man going and pissing everybody off, like showing them better hash. Like all of this stuff is all part of it, you know. Mm-hmm. It like really is, you know. Like the sayings that come out of our mouths, you know, like it's all part of it. And I think that for the young kids that are in there and for the kids that are coming to like their first legends as a hash maker, I think it's important that they get that feel, you know?
Yep. Yeah, the art this year. So Howdy did the design on the laminate last year, and then this year Howdy and Michael worked together.
We're gonna toss some ideas like back and forth. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, so it'd be like a collaboration. I mean, I had a great call with Howdy the other day, and you know the first one, the last year's the first year Legends design was more of like a throwback to, you know, the laminates of years before and the art of years before. And I think what he was saying this year, he's like, you know, we need to go like psychedelic. Like he really wants to like bring it, you know, with some totally different like crazy shit. So I think it's going to be fun to like see what you guys collectively come up with, but whether it's like the colorways, you know how we had talked before about.
Yeah,
like,
man. I think, you know, it's the culture is calling for it. I think the community is just kind of setting for it. This is how I feel, at least with just my career in a sense. The community like tells me what they like about what I'm doing. They respond to certain things more than others. It's not about selling out drops and all that shit. Like it's really about what is like resonating with you. I'm trying to make things that you use, things that like make you happy while you're doing the normal chores of things that you're happy doing. You know, the dunking stations, putting art on that stuff. Like I want art to be all over your coffee table, your sesh table, all of it. You know, like the whole table itself should be art, in my opinion. Like, it's on that kind of level. So I feel like the art connection with Legends, we're just following the kind of golden road of art that we're like chasing, and we're trying to make the next cool shit. You're trying to make the next cool batch of hash. It's similar. So I love that Howdy's on that level where he's like, I want to see the progression and take it to LA, hash culture of 2022, which is heavily influenced by psychedelics,
yeah.
It's not psychedelics like in the old school ways of thinking about that word. It's really a new form of it. Kids think of like, they don't know what they're going to see when they see me at one of my shows. They have no idea what I'm about to look like. And then they see me looking like some other streetwear skater kid. And they're like, oh, okay, but he's got this dead hat on. But so like you're breaking molds, man. And that's to me like what I like. Howdy's like about the breaking of the molds, but keeping with the change,
Yeah, I like the concept this year was to have Howdy do the design for the laminate, and then the colorways that Howdy uses, we would then, like Jersey would then take them and kind of incorporate that into art that way, which is I'm looking forward to. I think it's a cool concept. I think it actually would be.
We're gonna have.
I'm stoked to just get to see a bunch of your art.
That's
you'll have art there for people to.
That's what I'm happy about doing, because we're gonna be. Everybody will be getting. You made a joke. I think it was last year. It was like a random. I don't even know why I remember this, because it's like a random little blurb on your story, and it was like, don't expect to get anyone to answer a phone call like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving all the way to like January 2nd or something. And like, I was like, that shit stuck with me, because I was like, oh man, everybody's really in the spirit. And that was a cool thing about Legends, was everybody was in that, like, I'm not answering phones for nobody. If you're in the room that I'm in, I'm hanging out with you. If not, sorry, it's Christmas time. It's Hanukkah. It's, like it's just there's a certain energy about that time of year. So I'm really excited to kind of put a lot of art up for everybody to see, like that time of year. Make it like a nice show for that, because everybody will just be in that kind of different spirit. It's just it's a wild time, like to have a hash event, I think.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I know I'm super honored to have a piece of your art in my kitchen, which is every time anyone comes in, they're like, "Where the fuck did you get that?" I'm like, "Well,
I don't make a lot of them, like."
Oh,
it sells, and if it doesn't sell, I tell everybody it's gone.
Yeah. No, I was very, very stoked. I've got to. I'm going this week. Coming up on Wednesday, I think I'm having lunch with Fidel, and I'm going to finally bring him his piece of art from last year.
That's what's up.
Because he never picked it up. He's been so busy. I'll
busy.
Send you a shot. Oh, he's fucking. If he's not in SAC, he's in.
How many miles are on his car?
Oh my God, bro! Luckily, he got that new truck, which was good. He was in that Prius forever.
I know.
Just trapped.
It was only room for him and the dreads. The girl had to squeeze,
Yeah, but now he's got that super dope truck. He's like, fucking. So yeah. Now we're gonna go meet him at Carousel on Wednesday. Go have some fucking dope ass Lebanese food. And that's who does the food for Legends too. So
that's my brother, man. It's a wild ride he and I both had. We met each other that first time I went to Spanibus years ago, and it was like me working for Shiloh and him kind of supporting his brothers. And then we organized the Jai and Shiloh like seed collab. That's a whole other story. But it was in my Airbnb that I rented for everybody to stay at. And it was him, his cousin Sevi, fucking Hassan's 710 shout out over there in Barcelona, makes the cold cured fucking hash. That shit's wild. You got to try that the next time you're in Spain. But Fideli and me and all of us were just bagging seeds in the kitchen till like 5 a.m, getting yelled at by the neighbors in this fucking Barcelona building. And like, we'll never forget it. And we're bonded as brothers, like for life, because we didn't have our own careers then. Like, now we're like we have our own shit in the work for later on. And I had that collab piece, which was like a hint at what he and I are doing. And it's just kind of funny to see where we've all come. He's my favorite person to see at events these days, because we really grinded it out. We were really doing other shit for years, and now we're at, and like we're happy, and like it's really good to see him happy,
Oh, he still grinds it. Like he works like 7 days a week.
Nonstop, man.
Fucking nonstop, bro. He's like
that family.
He just grinds it out.
That whole family.
Oh, bro, they're on it for sure.
Shout out Big Mike Tuna, all those guys. They work their asses off.
Yeah, no, they get it for sure. Fuck yeah, it's gonna be fun, man. Legends Fidel will be there this year. We're talking to him about being a sponsor, so it'll definitely be a fun ass fucking event, man. I'm looking forward to it. So,
well, I mean, Wookerson, we've covered a lot of ground. You've given
We
a lot
could
of
talk all day. We could talk
bro.
all
We could
day.
keep going. You've given a ton of good advice. Like, you know, before I give you your like opening to do any shout outs, is there any like one piece of advice that you'd want to give up and coming artists in the scene that are, you know, trying to say follow in your footsteps?
Yeah. I didn't sell my first piece of art till I was in my mid-30s, fam. Don't fucking stop. Morgan Freeman was 48 when he got his first role. The guy who started Alibaba was like 37 when he started that shit. Don't fucking stop. Keep drawing in the black book. Don't ever fucking stop. Don't tell anybody what the fuck. Don't take advice from anyone. You know, that's rule number one. Never take advice from anyone. Just keep drawing in the black book. Let your career develop in silence if you need it to be. And don't show anyone if that's where you need it to be, but keep doing it. Nonstop. Always keep doing it. Always come back to that book. I got stacks of books. You know, like my kids will have ages of time to look at what my art career became because I was drawing all kinds of weird shit. And then in the end, when you finally decide you want to do this shit, like Banjo told me, you know, you got to paint, you got to step away as the person you are because you've been in this industry. Like for me, I was in the industry. He's like, you can't paint as Jersey Mike. That's not going to work. You got to have a name. Like I have Banjo. My name is Matt. You call me Matt. You can call me Banjo. I answer to both. But when I step on that torch, Matt doesn't step on that torch. Banjo steps on that torch. And there was something about that really like stuck out to me. And it was that point that all those black books, all those years, all that drawing, it all made sense at that point. And it was like, oh, I've been training for this. So I never gave up on it. I just kept drawing all those years. People told me art wasn't going to make me money. I still kept drawing. I just went and got a job, but I kept drawing, you know? And so like you just survive and you never stop and you never stop and you survive. And eventually that shit will find its light of day. I promise you. If you don't stop, it will find because, you know, opportunity has to find you working. Luck and opportunity, you got to be working to have that shit find you, you know? Never stop.
That's awesome, man. No, I think that's solid fucking advice. Do you, you know, anyone that, you know, I know you shouted a lot of people out at the beginning, but was there anyone or any project that you've got going on that you wanted to shout out before we sign off here?
You know, shout out my homie Kit, who really taught me how to screen print. He brought me over to Michael Rios' studio, who's the guy who printed for Santana back in the day. You'll see a lot of my stuff is inspired by Kit and Night 2000. Night 2000 is his Instagram. But Kit is really like a legend in the Bay Area because he writes with Lord's Crew, graffiti guy. I met him through a bunch of other graffiti guys that I've known and then other weed guys. He used to be the GM at Barbary Coast Lounge. But he really like when I left Third Gen, he left Barbary Coast and we both dug into art. And like he and I introduced each other to a lot of people to like further that career. You know, Michael Rios has been a huge inspiration for me, like being able just to go to his studio, knowing that he made all that work for Carlos Santana and all those tours and taps into the culture that I represent heavily with my art, you know, and like getting that cosign of like, you know, you're allowed to come to my studio type shit. You know, it means a lot, you know, like all those guys in Philly, all the artists in Philly who always let me in the studios, who always let me in there when I wasn't needed to be in there. You know, when I wasn't selling weed anymore and I was just working for Emerald Cup and I wasn't working with them, they were still like Hopper and all those guys were like, come to the studio. Josh at Natura, you know, Josh was big. Josh at Pistol Point as well. It's the same guy, but like he was big with kind of coaching me through my days at Emerald Cup, learning some corporate kind of tactics. You know, that's not what I do anymore, but it's not to say someone ain't going to offer me a creative director job in the future. And that fool gave me a lot of like, you know, what fors on how to deal with it. Shout out Sour Waves for keeping me on my toes and never getting booted off the internet or anybody off. You know, shout out Sour Waves for real, like being somebody who kind of will always coach you on how not to get canceled and booted off the gram. You know, BK the God, my homie out in New York, big guy in fashion. You know, like he was kind of like someone that helped me realize what I was doing was right. Like he's like a younger version of me, already knows like most of the shit that I fucking know, is already kind of like positioning himself with like cannabis companies and helping, you know, like his creative direction is going to end up being used in some cannabis company. I know at some point you'll catch him at the Astor Club all the time in New York. Those guys, David at HQ, man, that motherfucker let me bring all those cats I mentioned that first year in Spain, Shant, all those guys without having their names on a list. 20 people in the lobby. You're supposed to get kicked to the streets in Barcelona when you pull that stunt. David saw something in me. He's like, I don't know who this guy is, but he just brought in Shiloh, the whole Cookies team, and, you know, okay, we're going to deal with him. And me and David have become like really good friends over the years, you know? So like the international cannabis community shit, bro, if you ain't been to Spain, if you haven't been to Vancouver, if you haven't been to some of these spots, if you haven't go to Amsterdam, go to these places. You don't have to know anybody. Just fucking go. Like, just go. Find somebody to let you in the store. They'll let you in. You'll figure it out. If you really want to be in those stores, they'll let you in. And just learn, man. Like all of us. That's like, you know, just start. Grind it out. Learn. And like, you know, fucking hey, man, all the guys in the glass industry I could shout out for years and years and years. Big Country, Gaspar, you know, Tron, Credo, all the guys in Seattle, Johnny Quest, Microwavy Gravy, Beetlejuice down there in SoCal. He's really holding those guys down. Connor A. Bradley, kid from fucking Dead Scene, who's transitioned into working for Instagram. We're everywhere. Deadheads are everywhere, bro. Don't think that the cat at your job is not a deadhead. He might have been on tour for fucking 10 years. You don't know. You know?
Veggie burritos,
bro. Like ganja goo balls, all that shit. All my hats are dead. A homie like Young Cat got into the dead later in these years, and he's pushing hard as fuck. Like, I mean, like I said, man, Skelly 710. Some of those guys are putting out an example of like how to be. Hope Lord at Talking Terps. He's another one kind of started his brand and pushed, and he was always kind of like helping other dudes put things together, working behind the scenes with ASAP Mob, working behind the scenes with Flatbush Zombies. Now he's got like his own shit, you know. You were asking about advice to artists, man. My homie Variegated Troy was like just making pots and stuff, and Roger from Puffco turned a couple of us onto him, and I did a collab with him, and now everybody wants his pots. Like, he's not a young cat, man. He's got 3 beautiful kids. Like, grind your ass off, and like shit will show up one day, you know. Like a lot of these cats, man. Turtle Trees up in Portland, like JD Maples Den, you know, like a lot of those guys, I mean, they're grinders, you know. They get their hype and like they'll grind whether they have hype or not, you know. That's a true hash maker. That's a true glass blower. It's a true artist. You're doing it whether you get paid $20 for a spoon or 20 grand for a rig, you know. Like Slinger told me that, you know what I mean. Like, be that guy. Be the guy who's down to work for $20 and 20 grand. You'll be here forever, you know? I don't know, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. This has been hella fun.
Appreciate you coming on, man.
I hope I didn't embarrass myself or piss anybody off. You know what I'm saying? If I did, hit me up.
Fuck them. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Well, Wookerson, I'm stoked to connect with you at Legends and see all that incredible work. And, man, just incredibly excited to see, you know, what you got planned, man. I'm super.
Oh man, the Jameson hug is going to be a big deal. You know,
no, I'm a big hugger.
The hash squatch is substantial in size.
Hugs tight. Holds long.
Yeah.
I'm like Scott. I might hold an extra second, bro, there.
You ask him the next time you hug him, he'd be like, "Are you waiting for the oxytocin to kick in?" And he'll laugh. He'll fucking laugh. I swear. Because like, you know. But I really appreciate it. I hope, like, you know, I hope everybody had a fun time listening and watching to this shit. And, you know, I'll be tuning into your guys' next podcast for sure.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody. Thanks, everybody. Right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers.